Throughout history, humans have left behind traces of their existence that we still can't fully explain, from massive stone structures built with impossible precision to ancient artifacts that seem too advanced for their time. These archaeological mysteries continue to puzzle researchers today. From the ancient temples of Turkey to the underwater ruins off Japan's coast, from mysterious manuscripts that no one can read to precision-engineered stones that modern technology struggles to replicate, these archaeological puzzles challenge everything we thought we knew about our ancestors. Tonight, we'll explore the sites that shouldn't exist, the engineering that defies explanation, and the civilizations that vanished without a trace. Some mysteries may have answers, others may never be solved, but each one reveals something profound about human capability, ambition, and our endless drive to create something that will outlast us all. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt arrived at Göbekli Tepe in 1994, he expected to find the remains of a medieval cemetery. What he uncovered instead was a temple complex that predated Stonehenge by 6,000 years, built by people who weren't supposed to have the social organization or technical skills for such an undertaking. Within days of beginning excavation, Schmidt's team unearthed massive T-shaped pillars, each weighing up to 10 tons, arranged in deliberate circles that suggested something far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined possible. The site sat on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, near the modern city of Şanlıurfa. A 1963 archaeological survey had dismissed it as nothing more than an abandoned medieval cemetery, noting scattered limestone fragments across what appeared to be artificial mounds. For 3 decades, the report gathered dust in archives while the true nature of Göbekli Tepe remained hidden beneath centuries of accumulated soil and debris. Schmidt wasn't just any archaeologist. He had spent years working at Neolithic sites throughout the region, developing an intuition for spotting the subtle signs of ancient human activity. When he examined the 1963 survey photographs, something bothered him. Medieval cemeteries didn't typically feature large stone slabs positioned on elevated ground. The limestone fragments in those old photographs looked too massive, too deliberately shaped to be simple grave markers. His first visit to the site in 1994 confirmed his suspicions. The hill rose 50 feet above the surrounding landscape, its shape too perfect and symmetrical to be entirely natural. The limestone fragments weren't random broken stones scattered by time and weather. They were carved with deliberate patterns, and they were far too large for any medieval cemetery Schmidt had ever encountered. Some fragments showed edges that suggested they had once been part of much larger structures. Schmidt returned in 1995 with a small excavation team and basic tools. Within days, they had uncovered something that would challenge the entire archaeological understanding of human development. Just a few feet beneath the surface, the team's shovels struck solid stone. But these weren't natural rock formations. They were carved pillars, still standing upright after more than 11,000 years. The pillars emerged from the earth like sentinels from another age. Each one had been shaped into a distinctive T-form, with a broader top section resembling shoulders and a head. The surfaces bore intricate carvings of animals, not random decorations, but carefully planned artistic compositions that covered the stone. Lions prowled across the limestone. Scorpions raised their stingers in frozen threat. Vultures spread their wings as if preparing for flight. The initial radiocarbon dating sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The organic materials found in the fill dirt between the stones dated to approximately 9,600 BCE. This placed Göbekli Tepe's construction at the dawn of human civilization, in an era when people were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers struggling for survival. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an old building. It was a complete reversal of everything archaeologists thought they knew about how civilizations developed. Traditional archaeological theory held that humans first developed agriculture, which created food surpluses that allowed permanent settlements, which eventually led to the social organization necessary for monumental construction. Göbekli Tepe suggested the opposite sequence. Perhaps the need to build something sacred came first, driving the development of agriculture to support the communities gathering at these early religious sites. But one question dominated all others. How did hunter-gatherers accomplish this? The limestone fragments scattered across Göbekli Tepe weren't random broken markers. Each pillar stood 16 feet tall, carved with intricate depictions of animals that challenged everything archaeologists thought they knew about the capabilities of hunter-gatherer societies. These weren't the gentle creatures that would later dominate human art. Instead, the pillars showed a menacing world of predators and dangerous animals, lions prowling across stone surfaces, scorpions raising their stingers, vultures spreading their wings, creatures that threatened the very survival of early human communities. The craftsmanship revealed in these carvings defied simple explanation. Working with nothing more than stone tools, the builders had created relief sculptures with remarkable detail and naturalistic proportions. Individual feathers could be distinguished on the vulture's wings. The musculature of lions was rendered with anatomical accuracy. Scorpions appeared in profile with their segmented tails curved in threatening arcs. Each image had been carefully planned and executed with a level of artistic skill that suggested specialized craftsmen rather than amateur efforts. The choice of animals told its own story. These were not the docile sheep and cattle that would later appear in Neolithic art after the domestication of animals. Instead, the pillars featured an almost exclusive focus on dangerous predators and venomous creatures. Wild boars appeared frequently, their tusks prominent and threatening. Snakes slithered across the stone surfaces in sinuous curves. Spiders crept along the edges of the pillars, their legs spread in poses that suggested movement frozen in stone. Schmidt and his team noticed something else unusual about the animal imagery. Many of the creatures were depicted in combinations that wouldn't naturally occur together. A scorpion might appear beside a fox, with a crane positioned above them. These weren't simple nature scenes documenting the local wildlife. The arrangements suggested symbolic meaning, perhaps representing constellations or mythological narratives that have been lost to time. The prominence of vultures particularly fascinated researchers. These carrion birds appeared repeatedly throughout the complex, often positioned in elevated locations on the pillars. In many ancient cultures, vultures served as psychopomps, creatures believed to transport souls to the afterlife. The frequent depiction of vultures at Göbekli Tepe suggested the site may have served as a center for death rituals or ancestor worship. The bird's association with death and transformation would have held profound meaning for people living in an era when mortality was an ever-present reality. Beyond the animal carvings, the pillars bore other enigmatic symbols. Abstract geometric patterns appeared on some stones, crescents, circles, and H-shaped forms whose meanings remain unknown. Some pillars featured what appeared to be human arms and hands carved in relief, positioned as if the stones themselves were anthropomorphic figures. These humanoid elements suggested the pillars might represent ancestors, gods, or spiritual beings rather than simple architectural supports. The technical achievement of creating these pillars added another layer to the mystery. Each stone had been quarried from limestone bedrock, about a quarter mile from the construction site. The builders had to identify suitable stone, cut it free from the surrounding rock, shape it into the distinctive T-form, carve the elaborate surface decorations, transport the finished pillar across difficult terrain, and erect it in a precise position within the circular enclosures. Modern stonemasons have attempted to replicate the process using only Stone Age tools. The experiments confirmed that copper and stone implements could indeed shape limestone. But the work required extraordinary amounts of time and skilled labour. Creating a single pillar would have required several craftsmen working for months, suggesting that Göbekli Tepe's construction represented the organised effort of hundreds of people over many decades. Yet the most puzzling aspect of these stones remained unsolved. What drove hunter-gatherers to invest such enormous effort in creating them? Before civilization, ground-penetrating radar revealed at least 16 stone circles spread across 22 acres at Göbekli Tepe. The team had uncovered less than 5% of the total complex. Each circle followed a similar pattern. Two large central pillars, surrounded by smaller ones arranged in a ring, all carved from limestone quarried directly from the hillside. But the most remarkable discovery was what the site lacked. No cooking hearths, no houses, no trash pits, none of the typical signs of permanent settlement that should accompany such a massive construction project. The absence of domestic debris forced archaeologists to reconsider fundamental assumptions about the site's purpose. Every previously discovered Neolithic settlement featured the archaeological markers of daily life: broken pottery, food waste, tool-making debris, the remains of cooking fires. Göbekli Tepe had none of these. The stone circles stood in isolation, maintained with almost ritualistic cleanliness. Whatever happened here wasn't ordinary life. It was something set apart, something sacred. The architectural layout suggested careful planning across multiple generations. Each circular enclosure measured between 30 and 100 feet in diameter, with the two central pillars always positioned to face each other across the circle's center. The surrounding ring of smaller pillars varied in number, but always maintained precise spacing and alignment. Stone benches had been carved into the bedrock between some pillars, creating seating areas that could accommodate dozens of people gathered in ceremonial formation. The scale of construction became more apparent as excavations progressed. Some of the central pillars weighed upward of 20 tons. Transporting these massive stones from the quarry site, even over the relatively short distance of a quarter mile, would have required sophisticated understanding of leverage, friction, and coordinated human effort. Dozens of workers would have been needed to move each pillar, with the work requiring careful orchestration to prevent the stone from cracking or the workers from being crushed. Recent geophysical surveys revealed even more astonishing features beneath the surface. Magnetometry detected what appeared to be additional stone structures buried at depths, suggesting they predated the visible enclosures. The surveys indicated that Göbekli Tepe's construction may have begun even earlier than the radiocarbon dates suggested, pushing human monumental architecture back to an era when our species was supposed to be focused entirely on basic survival. The site's location wasn't accidental. From the hilltop, the view extended to the horizon in every direction. 11,000 years ago, this landscape would have been dramatically different from the agricultural fields visible today. The ancient builders would have looked out over a rich mosaic of oak woodlands, flowing streams, vast herds of gazelles, and the other game animals that sustained hunter-gatherer communities. The elevated position commanded views of migration routes that brought both animals and human groups through the region seasonally. The deliberate choice of this prominent hilltop suggested that visibility was important. The site was meant to be seen from a distance, to draw people from across the surrounding landscape. This wasn't a hidden sanctuary, but a beacon, a central gathering place where scattered bands of hunter-gatherers could come together for purposes that transcended daily survival. But perhaps the most enigmatic discovery was what the builders did after completing each circular enclosure. Rather than maintaining their monuments for future generations, they deliberately buried them. Each stone circle was carefully filled with tons of dirt and debris. Then new circles were built on top, creating layers of construction that spanned centuries. This pattern of building and burying suggested a complex ritual cycle that archaeologists still struggle to understand. The buried circles showed no signs of destruction or abandonment. They had been entombed at the height of their completion, as if the act of building was more important than the structure itself. Yet one question remained unanswered. Who were these people, and how did they organize such monumental effort? Archaeologists found over 100,000 animal bones at Göbekli Tepe. Every single one came from wild species gazelles, made up 60% of the remains, along with wild boar, sheep, red deer, and dozens of bird species. This evidence painted a clear picture. The site was built by hunter-gatherers, not farmers, because agriculture didn't exist yet. The very idea that nomadic peoples could organize the hundreds of workers needed to quarry, transport, and erect these massive stones challenged everything. Archaeologists thought they knew about early human societies. The bone analysis revealed patterns that told a story of massive gatherings and ceremonial feasting. The concentration of remains wasn't consistent with a small group living at the site permanently. Instead, the evidence suggested periodic influxes of large numbers of people who came together for specific events, consumed enormous quantities of meat, and then dispersed back to their traditional hunting territories. The bones showed butchery marks consistent with large-scale food preparation rather than the daily cooking of a residential community. Zoo archaeologists examining the remains noted something remarkable about the species distribution. The animals represented in the bone assemblages matched almost perfectly with the creatures carved on the stone pillars. Gazelles, wild boar, aurochs, and various bird species all appeared in both the artistic record and the food refuse. This correspondence suggested a deep connection between the symbolic world represented in the carvings and the practical reality of the feasts that took place among the stone circles. The presence of so many bird bones proved particularly significant. Cranes, geese, and other migratory species appeared frequently in the deposits. These birds followed seasonal migration patterns through the region, arriving in spring and autumn at predictable times. The abundance of bird remains suggested that gatherings at Göbekli Tepe may have been timed to coincide with these migrations, when both animal and human populations would naturally converge in the region's resource-rich environment. Isotope analysis of the bones provided additional insights into ancient ecological conditions. The chemical signatures preserved in the bone collagen revealed that the environment around Göbekli Tepe 11,000 years ago was significantly wetter and more diverse than today. The region supported dense oak and pistachio woodlands interspersed with grasslands, creating an ideal habitat for the large herbivore populations that sustained both human hunters and the predators depicted on the pillars. The absence of domesticated animal bones was absolute and telling. Not a single sheep or goat bone showed the morphological changes associated with domestication. The cattle remains all came from massive wild aurochs, not the smaller, domesticated varieties that would appear in later millennia. This evidence definitively placed Göbekli Tepe's primary construction phase in the pre-agricultural era, before humans had begun the process of selectively breeding and controlling animal populations. Yet the sheer quantity of bones raised profound questions about logistics and organization. Feeding the workforce required to build Göbekli Tepe would have demanded the coordinated hunting efforts of multiple groups. Archaeological evidence from other sites shows that hunter-gatherer bands typically numbered between 25 and 50 individuals, operating semi-independently across large territories. Bringing together enough people to construct the stone circles would have required unprecedented cooperation between these scattered groups. The bone deposits also contained evidence of specialized butchery and food distribution. Certain high-value portions of animals appeared in concentrations, suggesting differential access or ritual sharing patterns. Skulls and long bones rich in marrow showed up in specific locations, while other skeletal elements were scattered more randomly. This spatial patterning hinted at social hierarchies or ceremonial protocols governing how meat was distributed during the gatherings. But perhaps the most significant implication of the bone evidence was what it revealed about the drivers of human social evolution. The traditional archaeological model held that agriculture created food surpluses, which enabled population growth, which led to social complexity, which finally allowed for monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe suggested the sequence might have been reversed. The need to gather periodically for ritual purposes may have driven the development of the organizational structures necessary to support larger human groups. Standing before the Great Pyramid of Giza, one question dominates every other thought. How did they build this? For over 4,500 years, this monument has challenged human understanding. The pyramid contains over 2.3 million stone blocks, some weighing up to 70 tons, positioned with mathematical precision that modern engineers struggle to replicate. The base forms a nearly perfect square, with sides differing by less than 2 inches, while internal chambers align with astronomical phenomena that suggest knowledge far beyond what Bronze Age peoples should have possessed. The sheer scale of the construction defies casual comprehension. The pyramid originally stood 481 feet tall, making it the tallest human-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. The base covers 13 acres, large enough to fit both St. Peter's Basilica in Rome and the cathedrals of Florence and Milan inside its footprint. The total volume of stone used in its construction exceeds 2.5 million cubic meters, requiring the quarrying, transportation, and precise placement of an average of one block every 2 to 3 minutes during the estimated 20-year construction period. But the true mystery lies not in the pyramid's size, but in its precision. The base sits almost perfectly level, with the southeastern corner just half an inch higher than the northwestern corner across a distance of over 750 feet. This levelness was achieved on the irregular limestone bedrock of the Giza Plateau, requiring the builders to first create a flat foundation surface with extraordinary accuracy. Modern surveyors using laser levels struggle to achieve similar precision over such distances. The alignment of the pyramid's sides to the cardinal directions represents another remarkable achievement. The structure is oriented to true north with an accuracy of 3/60th of a single degree. This precision requires sophisticated astronomical observations, as true north cannot be determined by simply observing the sun's movement. The ancient Egyptians would have needed to track circumpolar stars over extended periods, using techniques that left no archaeological trace but demanded both patience and mathematical sophistication. The internal architecture adds layers to the mystery. The Grand Gallery, rising at a 26-degree angle through the heart of the pyramid, features a corbelled ceiling that distributes the massive weight of the stone above it. This architectural solution predated the development of the true arch by centuries, yet achieved the same structural goal through a different geometric approach. The precision of the stonework in the King's Chamber, where massive granite blocks fit together with joints less than 1/50th of an inch wide, suggests the use of measuring instruments accurate to fractions of a millimeter. The astronomical alignments within the pyramid have sparked decades of research and speculation. The northern shaft from the King's Chamber originally pointed toward Thuban, the pole star of ancient Egypt, while the southern shaft aligned with Orion's belt. These alignments weren't coincidental. They reflected deliberate incorporation of astronomical knowledge into the monument's design, connecting the pharaoh's final resting place to the cosmic order the Egyptians believed governed existence. The choice of construction materials reveals sophisticated understanding of geology and engineering. The core of the pyramid consists of local limestone blocks, readily available from quarries on the Giza Plateau, but the inner chambers were built with granite transported from Aswan, over 500 miles up the Nile. This granite, one of the hardest stones available to ancient builders, was chosen specifically for its strength and durability in supporting the tremendous weight of the structure above. The smooth white limestone casing stones that originally covered the pyramid's exterior came from quarries at Tura, across the Nile from Giza. These fine-grained limestone blocks were cut and polished to create a smooth, reflective surface that would have made the completed pyramid gleam brilliantly in the Egyptian sunday. Most of these casing stones were removed in later centuries for use in other construction projects, but the few remaining examples show the extraordinary quality of the stonework. The logistics of the construction project rivaled the technical challenges. Recent archaeological discoveries of workers' villages near the pyramid reveal the massive infrastructure required to support the project. Yet despite centuries of study, the exact methods used to construct the Great Pyramid remain subjects of intense debate and ongoing research. The straight ramp theory represents the most traditional explanation for pyramid construction. Ancient Egyptians could have built enormous ramps extending from the pyramid base to its peak, allowing workers to drag stones up gentle inclines. A ramp with a 5-degree slope extending to the pyramid's peak would need to stretch over 3 miles long. While massive, this falls within the capabilities of a civilization that organized thousands of workers for decades-long projects. But archaeological surveys around the Great Pyramid have found no evidence of such massive ramps, and the volume of material needed would exceed that of the pyramid itself. The mathematics of straight ramp construction reveals the theory's fundamental problem. As the pyramid grew taller, the ramp would need to be constantly extended and elevated to maintain a workable slope. Engineers estimate that a ramp reaching the pyramid's apex would require more than 7 million cubic meters of material, nearly 3 times the volume of the pyramid itself. This material would then need to be completely removed after construction, leaving no trace behind. The logistical challenge of building, maintaining, and dismantling such a massive structure rivals the challenge of building the pyramid itself. Supporters of the straight ramp theory point to archaeological evidence from other pyramid sites. At the Red Pyramid of Sneferu, archaeologists discovered remains of construction ramps made from limestone chips, gypsum, and tafla, a local clay. These ramps confirmed that ancient Egyptians did use ramped approaches for moving stones. However, the ramps found at other sites were relatively small and appeared designed for specific construction phases rather than serving as the primary method for raising millions of blocks to great heights. The workers' village discovered near the Great Pyramid provides insights into the scale of organization required. Excavations revealed bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves daily, breweries producing beer for the workforce, and copper workshops manufacturing and maintaining the tools used to quarry and shape stone. The infrastructure supported a permanent workforce of several thousand skilled workers, supplemented by rotating crews of laborers who fulfilled their civic obligations to the pharaoh through construction work rather than military service. Hieroglyphic texts from the Pyramid Age describe vast workforces quarrying stone, building infrastructure, and moving materials across Egypt. The texts use terms suggesting organized labor divisions, stone haulers, craftsmen, tool makers, overseers, indicating a sophisticated administrative system. But nowhere do these texts describe the specific techniques used to raise stones to the pyramid's upper levels, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct methods from physical evidence and engineering analysis. Experimental archaeology has tested the straight ramp theory under controlled conditions. Researchers in the 1990 seconds attempted to move multi-ton stone blocks up wooden ramps using only tools available to ancient Egyptians. The experiments confirmed that teams of workers using ropes, wooden sledges, and lubricating liquids could indeed move heavy stones up gentle slopes. However, the experiments also revealed significant challenges. Maintaining straight trajectories on long ramps required constant adjustment. The ramps themselves needed substantial reinforcement to prevent collapse under the weight of moving stones, and the physical effort required increased dramatically as the ramp's incline grew steeper. The absence of ramp remnants around the Great Pyramid remains the theory's most significant weakness. If straight ramps were used, their dismantling should have left traces disturbed ground, compacted fill material, or debris fields where ramp material was dumped after use. Careful archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar and electromagnetic imaging have found no such evidence. The plateau around the pyramid shows the expected debris from stoneworking and construction, but nothing suggesting the massive earthworks required for straight ramp construction. Alternative explanations for the absence of ramp evidence have been proposed. Some researchers suggest the ramps may have been built on the opposite side of the plateau, and their remains now lie buried under modern Cairo's urban sprawl. Others propose that ramp material was recycled into the pyramid's core or used to level the plateau for subsequent construction projects. But these explanations require assumptions not supported by archaeological evidence. The straight ramp theory, while mechanically sound, faces insurmountable problems when confronted with the physical reality of the Great Pyramid's construction site. Yet if straight ramps weren't used, how did the ancient Egyptians raise millions of tons of stone to heights exceeding 450 feet? The spiral ramp theory attempts to solve the material problem by wrapping the ramp around the pyramid's exterior. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin calculated that a spiral ramp with an 8.5-degree slope could reach the pyramid's peak, while using only a fraction of the material needed for a straight ramp. Satellite imagery has revealed what appear to be spiral patterns on the pyramid's faces, possibly remnants of ancient ramps. However, the spiral ramp theory struggles with the pyramid's corner angles. The tight turns required at each corner would make it nearly impossible to drag multi-ton blocks around sharp angles. Houdin developed his theory through detailed three-dimensional modeling and structural analysis. His calculations showed that a spiral ramp built against the pyramid's outer faces would use approximately 90% less material than a straight ramp, while providing access to every level of the structure. The ramp would rise incrementally as construction progressed, with each circuit around the pyramid gaining elevation while maintaining a manageable slope for hauling blocks. This approach would solve the material problem while providing a practical means of raising stones to the pyramid's summit. The satellite evidence supporting spiral ramps comes from thermal imaging and photogrammetric analysis of the pyramid's surface. Subtle irregularities in the remaining casing stones and underlying core blocks create patterns that some researchers interpret as remnants of ramp structures. These patterns appear as slight variations in stone size and placement that spiral around the pyramid at consistent angles. While these features could have other explanations, their geometric regularity suggests deliberate engineering rather than random variation. The corner problem remains the spiral ramp theory's most significant challenge. At each of the pyramid's four corners, the ramp would need to make a 90-degree turn. Dragging a multi-ton block around such a sharp angle would require extraordinary precision and control. The teams pulling the block would need to coordinate their movements to navigate the turn without the block sliding off the ramp or becoming wedged against the corner. Modern engineers estimate that negotiating these corners would require reducing the block's momentum to nearly zero, then carefully redirecting its movement, a process that would dramatically slow construction and risk accidents. Houdin addressed the corner problem by proposing that the ancient Egyptians used a combination of external and internal ramps. The external spiral ramp, he suggested, was used for the first third of the pyramid's height. After reaching a certain elevation, construction continued using internal ramps and galleries carved within the pyramid structure itself. This hybrid approach would eliminate the corner problem for the pyramid's upper sections, while explaining other mysterious features of the pyramid's architecture. The theory gained support from the pyramid's design features. The Grand Gallery's unusual dimensions and corbelled ceiling could have housed a sophisticated lifting system for raising blocks through the pyramid's interior. The mysterious shafts extending from the king's and queen's chambers might have served as ventilation for workers labouring in internal spaces. Even the pyramid's unfinished subterranean chamber could represent an early construction phase later abandoned when builders shifted to internal work. Physical evidence for external spiral ramps includes stone blocks protruding from the pyramid's faces at regular intervals. These blocks, called backing stones, extend several inches beyond the pyramid's surface and appear at vertical intervals consistent with ramp construction. Some researchers interpret these as anchor points for ramp structures, while others suggest they serve different purposes during construction. The debate continues, with each side citing the same physical evidence to support contradictory conclusions. Computer simulations of spiral ramp construction have revealed both advantages and limitations. The simulations show that spiral ramps would provide excellent access to the pyramid's faces for placing the precision-cut casing stones that originally covered the structure. Workers on the ramp could easily reach the pyramid's surface to adjust and secure each casing block. However, the simulations also confirm that the tight corners would create significant challenges for moving the largest blocks, particularly the massive granite beams used in the burial chambers. Recent discoveries have added new dimensions to the spiral ramp debate. Microgravimetry surveys detecting density variations within the pyramid have revealed what might be internal passages or ramps spiraling upward through the structure's core. But one question persists. If the ancient Egyptians used spiral ramps, why did they leave no clear record of their construction methods? In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project used cosmic ray muon tomography to discover a large void above the Grand Gallery. This void, about 100 feet long and 25 feet high, matches the size and location predicted by internal ramp theories. Additionally, ground-penetrating radar has detected what appear to be internal passages not visible from the pyramid's exterior. These discoveries support theories about internal construction methods, while raising new questions about the pyramid's true purpose and the sophisticated engineering knowledge required to create such hidden spaces. The muon tomography technique works by detecting subatomic particles called muons that constantly rain down on Earth from cosmic ray interactions in the upper atmosphere. These particles can penetrate deep into dense materials like stone, but they're absorbed at different rates depending on the density of the material they pass through. By placing detectors inside the pyramid and measuring the muon flux from different angles, scientists can create three-dimensional maps of the pyramid's internal structure, revealing voids and chambers without drilling or excavation. The discovery of the Big Void, as researchers named it, sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The space's dimensions suggested it wasn't a small construction gap or settlement crack, but a deliberate architectural feature. Its position directly above the Grand Gallery, one of the pyramid's most impressive interior spaces, suggested a relationship between the two features. Some researchers proposed the void might be a continuation of the Grand Gallery, while others suggested it could be a relieving chamber designed to reduce weight on the gallery below. The void's purpose remains hotly debated. One theory suggests it served as a counterweight system for lifting blocks during construction. The space could have housed massive wooden frames and rope systems that allowed workers to raise stones through the pyramid's interior using leverage and counterweights. After construction, the lifting equipment would have been removed, leaving the empty space behind. This explanation would support Jean-Pierre Houdin's internal ramp theory and explain how the largest blocks reached the burial chambers deep within the pyramid. Alternative theories propose that the void has astronomical or religious significance. The ancient Egyptians believed the pharaoh's soul traveled to the stars after death, particularly to Orion's belt, which represented the god Osiris. The void's alignment and position might encode astronomical information or serve as a symbolic passage for the pharaoh's spiritual journey. The lack of any obvious access to the space supports this interpretation. It wasn't meant to be entered by living humans, but served a purely symbolic or spiritual purpose. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have detected additional anomalies within the pyramid structure. These surveys reveal density variations and possible passages that don't correspond to any known chambers or corridors. Some of these features appear to spiral upward through the pyramid's core, lending support to internal ramp theories. Others seem to connect different levels of the pyramid in ways that current architectural understanding cannot explain. Each new discovery raises more questions about how much of the pyramid's internal structure remains unknown. The technology revealing these hidden spaces represents a revolution in archaeology. Traditional excavation would require drilling through irreplaceable ancient stonework, potentially damaging the monument. Non-invasive imaging techniques allow researchers to explore the pyramid's interior without physical intervention, revealing secrets that have remained hidden for millennia. The Scan Pyramids project continues to operate, with new detector placements and longer observation periods, gradually refining the three-dimensional map of the pyramid's interior. In 2023, researchers confirmed the existence of a 30-foot corridor near the pyramid's north face, detected using the same muon tomography techniques. This passage, previously unknown to archaeology, appears to be connected to the void above the Grand Gallery. The corridor's function remains unclear. It doesn't connect to any known chambers, and its orientation doesn't match expected patterns for either construction ramps or burial passages. The discovery demonstrates that even after centuries of study, the Great Pyramid still holds secrets. The implications of these hidden chambers extend beyond the specific question of construction methods. They reveal that the ancient Egyptians created architectural features within the pyramid that served purposes we don't yet understand. But perhaps the most intriguing question is what else might be hidden within the pyramid's massive bulk. waiting to be discovered. Walk into any bookstore, and you'll find shelves lined with books claiming to reveal Stonehenge's true purpose. Ancient aliens built it as a landing pad. Druids used it for human sacrifice. It's a giant calendar, a healing temple, or a portal to other dimensions. Hollywood has featured it in everything, from horror films to fantasy epics. For many people, Stonehenge represents the ultimate ancient mystery, a monument so impossible that only supernatural explanations make sense. But what does the archaeological evidence actually tell us about this site that has captured human imagination for centuries? The cultural obsession with Stonehenge began long before modern media. In the 1600s, antiquarian John Aubrey first suggested that Druids built the monument, beginning a mythological association that persists today despite being thoroughly disproven by archaeological evidence. By the 1700s, William Stukeley had expanded this theory, describing elaborate Druidic ceremonies and human sacrifices among the stones. The Romantic movement of the 1800s embraced these dramatic tales, turning Stonehenge into a symbol of ancient wisdom and mystical power that captured the Victorian imagination. The 20th century brought even wilder theories. In 1965, astronomer Gerald Hawkins published Stonehenge Decoded, claiming the monument was a sophisticated computer for predicting eclipses. The book became a bestseller, spawning countless imitations and documentaries about ancient astronomical knowledge. The rise of the New Age movement in the 1960 seconds added beliefs about healing crystals, ley lines, and spiritual energy fields. Today, tens of thousands of people gather at Stonehenge each summer solstice, many believing they're participating in ancient rituals that have no historical basis. The reality revealed by modern archaeology is both more complex and more fascinating than any fictional account. Radiocarbon dating has demolished the Druid theory. The monument was largely complete by 2000 BCE, more than 1,000 years before the Celtic culture that produced Druids even existed. The real builders were Neolithic and Bronze Age peoples whose DNA analysis reveals they were descended from early farmers who migrated from Anatolia and the Iberian Peninsula. These weren't primitive hunter-gatherers struggling for survival, but members of a complex society with sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and logistics. The astronomical alignments at Stonehenge are real but simpler than popular theories suggest. The monument is oriented toward the sunrise on the summer solstice and sunset on the winter solstice. From the center of the stone circle, the sun rises directly above the heel stone on the longest day of the year. This alignment was clearly intentional, demonstrating the builder's careful observation of the sun's annual movement. However, claims about Stonehenge being able to predict eclipses hundreds of years in advance have no archaeological support and have been debunked by detailed astronomical analysis. The healing properties attributed to Stonehenge also have archaeological roots, though not in the way New Age believers imagine. Chemical analysis of the blue stones reveals they come from springs in Wales that were considered sacred by prehistoric peoples. Some of the cremated remains found at the site show evidence of illness and injury, suggesting people may have brought their sick to the monument seeking healing. But this healing likely involved ritual and ceremony rather than mystical energy fields. The psychological and social support provided by religious ceremonies rather than supernatural forces. The acoustic properties of the stone circle do create unusual sound effects. Voices and music resonate differently within the monument, and certain positions create acoustic sweet spots where sound focuses and amplifies. These phenomena may have enhanced the psychological impact of ceremonies, making participants feel they were experiencing something supernatural. The builders may have deliberately chosen the stone arrangement to create these effects, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of sound propagation without requiring advanced physics knowledge. Recent discoveries continue to refine our understanding. In 2020, archaeologists discovered a circle of massive pits surrounding Stonehenge, each one precisely placed to form a perfect circle over a mile in diameter. These pits, created around the same time as the monument, suggest the sacred landscape was even more complex than previously thought. The discovery demonstrates that Stonehenge wasn't an isolated structure, but the centerpiece of an elaborate ritual complex that extended across the surrounding landscape. The durability of Stonehenge myths reveals something profound about human psychology. We want ancient peoples to have possessed secret knowledge or supernatural powers, yet the archaeological truth is far more inspiring than any fiction. Bronze Age farmers created one of the world's most impressive monuments through careful planning, hard work, and sophisticated understanding of their environment. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed that Stonehenge was built in 5 distinct phases over more than 1,500 years, from about 3,100 BCE to 1,600 BCE. The monument we see today represents the final phase, but it began as something completely different, a simple circular earthwork with wooden posts. The first phase, around 3,100 BCE, consisted of a circular bank and ditch with 56 holes around the perimeter. Archaeological evidence shows that cremated human remains were buried in many of these holes, making this early version of Stonehenge a cemetery rather than a temple. The Aubrey holes, named after their 17th century discoverer, provide crucial evidence about Stonehenge's earliest purpose. Excavations of these pits revealed that they once held wooden posts, creating a circular timber structure within the earthwork enclosure. But more significantly, at least 25 of the holes contained deposits of cremated human bone. Radiocarbon dating of these remains shows they were buried over a period of several centuries, suggesting Stonehenge functioned as a cemetery for a select group of individuals, perhaps the elite of the surrounding communities, or people who held special religious or social status. The second phase, beginning around 2,600 BCE, marks Stonehenge's transformation from cemetery to stone monument. The builders arranged approximately 80 blue stones in 2 concentric circles, each stone weighing about 4 tons. These stones came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away, a distance that represents one of the greatest logistical achievements of prehistoric Europe. Recent archaeological work has identified the exact quarries where these stones were extracted, revealing chisel marks and partially worked stones that demonstrate the extraordinary effort invested in obtaining these specific materials. The transportation of the blue stones remains one of archaeology's great puzzles. The most plausible route would have combined overland transport and water travel, with the stones moved on wooden sledges to the Welsh coast, loaded onto boats or rafts for the sea journey around southwestern Britain, then transported up rivers and overland to Salisbury Plain. Recent experiments have demonstrated that such a journey is theoretically possible, but it would have required enormous coordination, specialized equipment, and many months of dangerous travel. The investment suggests the blue stones held profound significance to their transporters. Around 2,500 BCE, during the third phase, the builders began erecting the massive sarsen stones that dominate today's Stonehenge. These stones, some weighing up to 50 tons, were dragged from Marlborough Downs about 20 miles north of the site. The builders shaped them using only stone hammers, creating the precise joints that hold the structure together. The sarsen circle originally contained 30 upright stones, topped by a continuous ring of horizontal lintels, each carefully shaped to create the circle's curve. Inside this circle, they built the trilithon's 5 massive doorways made of 2 uprights topped by a lintel, with the largest trilithon standing 24 feet high. The precision of the stonework rivals anything achieved by later civilizations. The lintels were secured to the uprights using mortise and tenon joints, projecting knobs on the upright stones fit into corresponding holes carved in the underside of the lintels. The lintels were also connected to each other using tongue and groove joints, creating a stable ring despite the massive weight involved. This sophisticated joinery, more commonly associated with woodworking than stone construction, demonstrates advanced engineering knowledge and meticulous planning. The fourth and fifth phases involved rearranging the blue stones within the sarsen structure, and possibly adding other features that have since disappeared. Archaeological evidence shows that the monument underwent several modifications during its active use period, with stones being moved, reset, or removed entirely. These changes suggest evolving religious practices or shifting power dynamics among the communities using the site. By 1600 BCE, major construction had ceased, though the monument continued to hold cultural significance for centuries afterward. The extraordinary investment required to build Stonehenge over 1,500 years reveals its importance to its builders. Generation after generation devoted enormous resources to maintaining and expanding the monument, suggesting it served as a central gathering place for communities across a wide region. The combination of celestial alignments, careful acoustic design, and monumental scale created a space that must have generated profound psychological and spiritual effects on those who gathered there. Modern excavations of the surrounding landscape have revealed that Stonehenge sat at the centre of a vast ceremonial complex. The avenue, a parallel-sided enclosure stretching for nearly 2 miles, connected Stonehenge to the River Avon. But one question remains central to understanding this monument. What drew people to continue building here across so many generations? Around 2600 BCE, the builders began the second phase, abandoning timber for stone. They arranged approximately 80 blue stones in 2 concentric circles. These stones, each weighing about 4 tons, came from the Preseli Hills in Wales, over 150 miles away. Recent archaeological work has identified the exact quarries where these stones were extracted, revealing the enormous effort required to transport them. The presence of these specific stones, brought from such a distance, suggests that the material itself held sacred significance to the builders. The geological identification of the blue stone's origin represents one of modern archaeology's most significant achievements. In the 1922, petrologist H.H. Thomas first determined that the stones came from Wales by analysing their mineral composition and comparing it to rock samples from across Britain. His work identified spotted dolerite, a distinctive blue-grey stone found only in the Preseli Hills of southwestern Wales. Subsequent research has pinpointed specific outcrops where the stones were quarried, with chisel marks and partially extracted stones still visible at sites like Carn Godog and Craig Rossi Felin. The distance between the quarries and Stonehenge over 150 miles, as the crow flies, but much longer, following practical transport routes raises profound questions about why these particular stones were chosen. Local sarsen stones were readily available much closer to Stonehenge, yet the builders invested enormous effort in obtaining stones from Wales. This suggests the blue stones held special significance beyond their physical properties. Perhaps they came from a sacred mountain. Or maybe they were already part of an earlier monument in Wales that was dismantled and transported to Stonehenge, bringing its accumulated spiritual power to the new location. Recent excavations at the Welsh quarries have revealed the sophisticated techniques used to extract the stones. The builders exploited natural weaknesses in the rock, using wooden wedges driven into cracks and then soaked with water. As the wood expanded, it split the rock along predetermined lines. Archaeological evidence shows they worked during winter months, when natural freeze-thaw cycles could assist in fracturing the stone. The partially extracted stones left behind demonstrate a methodical approach, with workers carefully shaping each stone at the quarry before the arduous journey to Salisbury Plain. The transportation route remains hotly debated. The traditional theory proposes a combined land and sea journey overland to the Welsh coast, by boat or raft around the southwestern tip of Britain and up the Bristol Channel, then along rivers and overland across southern England. This route would have required navigating treacherous coastal waters with heavy cargo, crossing multiple river systems, and hauling stones up steep terrain. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated the feasibility of moving such stones using Neolithic technology. A controversial alternative theory suggests glacial transport brought the stones naturally to southern England during the Ice Age. Proponents argue that glaciers moving across Britain could have carried the stones from Wales to the Salisbury Plain area, where Neolithic peoples simply collected them. However, geological surveys have found no other glacial erratics from the Preseli Hills in the Stonehenge area, and the glacial extent during the last ice age likely didn't reach southern England. Most archaeologists reject the glacial theory based on this evidence. Chemical analysis of the blue stones has revealed another intriguing detail. Springs near the Welsh quarries contain minerals thought to have healing properties by ancient peoples. Analysis of water still flowing from these springs shows elevated levels of minerals associated with therapeutic uses in prehistoric medicine. This discovery supports theories that the stones were believed to possess healing powers, explaining why people brought their sick to Stonehenge and why the builders invested such effort in transporting stones from this specific location. The arrangement of the blue stones within Stonehenge changed multiple times over centuries. Archaeological evidence shows they were first placed in 2 concentric circles, then later rearranged into a horseshoe shape within the Sarsen circle, and possibly moved again in subsequent modifications. This repeated rearrangement suggests ongoing ritual significance and evolving religious practices. Each modification would have required substantial effort, indicating that the blue stones remained central to Stonehenge's function throughout its active period. Isotope analysis of human remains found at Stonehenge suggests that some of the buried individuals came from Wales, possibly accompanying the stones on their journey or representing communities involved in their transport. This evidence supports theories that Stonehenge served as a unifying monument for peoples across a wide geographic area, with the blue stones physically embodying the connection between distant communities. The blue stones stand as testimony to the profound religious beliefs that motivated Neolithic peoples to undertake one of prehistory's most ambitious engineering projects. But the question remains, what did these stones represent that justified such extraordinary effort? The astronomical alignments at Stonehenge are real, but they're simpler than popular theories suggest. The monument is oriented toward the sunrise on the summer solstice and sunset on the winter solstice. From the center of the stone circle, the sun rises directly above the heel stone on the longest day of the year. This alignment was clearly intentional, but it doesn't require advanced mathematical knowledge, just careful observation of the sun's annual movement. Claims about Stonehenge being a complex astronomical computer have been thoroughly debunked by modern research. The summer solstice alignment is Stonehenge's most dramatic astronomical feature. On the morning of the longest day, observers standing within the stone circle watch the sun rise directly above the heel stone, a massive sarsen stone positioned outside the main circle. The alignment is precise enough that it couldn't be coincidental. Archaeological evidence suggests that large gatherings occurred at Stonehenge during the solstices, with people travelling from across Britain to witness the sun's interaction with the stones. The winter solstice alignment is equally significant but often overlooked in popular accounts. On the shortest day of the year, the sunset aligns with the monument's main axis when viewed from the opposite direction. Some archaeologists argue this alignment may have been the primary focus, with the winter solstice marking the sun's symbolic death and rebirth. The connection between Stonehenge and death is supported by the cremated human remains found throughout the site, suggesting it may have been primarily a place for honouring the dead during the darkest time of the year. The astronomical computer theory, popularised by Gerald Hawkins in the 1960 seconds, claimed that Stonehenge's builders used the 56 Aubrey holes as a system for predicting eclipses. Hawkins argued that by moving markers around these holes according to specific patterns, ancient astronomers could forecast lunar and solar eclipses years in advance. His theory captured public imagination and spawned countless books and documentaries. However, subsequent research has thoroughly discredited these claims. Statistical analysis showed that many of Hawkins's proposed alignments were no more precise than random chance would produce. The problem with the astronomical computer theory is that it attributes to ancient peoples a level of astronomical understanding that required centuries of systematic observation and mathematical development to achieve. While Neolithic peoples were certainly capable observers of the sky, predicting eclipses requires understanding the Saros cycle, the 18-year period after which eclipse patterns repeat. No archaeological evidence suggests that Stonehenge's builders possessed this knowledge, and the monument's design doesn't incorporate the features that would be necessary for such complex calculations. More recent astronomical analysis has revealed subtler alignments that reflect genuine ancient knowledge. The monument's orientation captures not just the solstice sunrises and sunsets, but also marks the extreme positions of the moon's rising and setting over its 18.6-year cycle. This lunar standstill would have been observable to anyone paying careful attention to the moon's movements over multiple decades. The incorporation of lunar alignments alongside solar ones suggests the builders tracked both celestial bodies, possibly relating them to agricultural cycles or religious calendars. The accuracy of Stonehenge's solar alignment, precise to within a fraction of a degree, demonstrates sophisticated observational techniques. The builders would have needed to track the sunrise position over multiple years, marking its location on the horizon each day as it shifted north during spring and south during autumn. By identifying the extreme positions where the sunrise appears to pause before reversing direction, the literal meaning of solstice, they could determine the exact alignment for the monument. This requires patience and systematic record-keeping, but not advanced mathematics or special instruments. Archaeological evidence from other British Neolithic sites reveals that solar and lunar alignments were common features of ritual monuments. The Passage Tomb at Newgrange in Ireland, built around the same time as Stonehenge's first phase, is precisely aligned to capture sunlight in its inner chamber during the winter solstice sunrise. This suggests that tracking celestial movements and incorporating astronomical alignments into sacred architecture was widespread among Neolithic communities across the British Isles. The motivation for these astronomical alignments likely combined practical and spiritual concerns. The solstices marked crucial moments in the agricultural calendar, signaling the appropriate times for planting and harvest. By creating monuments that captured these moments, ancient peoples could ensure accurate timekeeping for their communities. But beyond practical timekeeping, the alignments connected human monuments to the cosmic order, suggesting that the builders saw themselves as participants in celestial patterns rather than mere observers. When archaeologist Alexei Vranich first aimed his laser scanner at the scattered stone blocks of Puma Punku, he expected to document another ruined temple complex. What his instruments revealed would challenge everything scientists thought they knew about Bronze Age engineering capabilities. The data showed cutting precision that rivaled modern machine tools, joint tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters, and construction techniques that seemed to defy the technological limitations of their time. Many stone blocks at Puma Punku were cut with tolerances of less than 1 millimeter. The precision measurements documented by modern laser scanning revealed details invisible to earlier researchers who relied on manual measurement tools. The faces of individual blocks were flat to within 0.5 millimeters across spans of several feet, a level of accuracy that requires not just skilled hands, but sophisticated quality control during the manufacturing process. The edges where blocks met showed similarly precise tolerances, with gaps between adjacent stones measuring less than a human hair's width in many locations. This precision wasn't limited to small, easily worked stones, but extended to blocks weighing hundreds of kilograms. The technological challenge of achieving such precision with Bronze Age tools becomes apparent when modern stonemasons attempt to replicate the work. Using copper chisels and stone hammers, the tools available to the Tiwanaku builders, experienced craftsmen struggle to create surfaces flat to within several millimeters, let alone the sub-millimeter precision found at Puma Punku. The ancient builders somehow achieved accuracy levels that would typically require metal tools, measuring instruments, and multiple rounds of quality checking and correction. The mystery deepens when examining the complexity of the cuts. Many blocks feature not just flat surfaces, but precise right angles, perfectly straight edges, and smooth curves. Some stones show evidence of drilling, with circular holes bored straight through the andesite with remarkable uniformity. The drill holes maintain consistent diameter throughout their depth, suggesting the use of fixed guides or templates to control the drilling process. Yet no such guides have been found in the archaeological record. Three-dimensional modelling of how the blocks fit together revealed another astonishing aspect of Puma Punku's construction. The stones weren't simply stacked, but formed complex three-dimensional puzzles. Each block was shaped to connect with its neighbours at specific angles, creating interlocking joints that required precise planning and execution. The blocks could only be assembled in one specific sequence. Inserting them in the wrong order would be impossible due to the interlocking design. This suggests the builders worked from detailed plans, conceptualizing the entire structure before cutting the first stone. The choice of material adds another layer to the mystery. Andesite is one of the hardest stones available, ranking 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Copper, the hardest metal available to Tiwanaku builders, ranks only 3 on the same scale, meaning copper tools shouldn't be able to cut andesite effectively. Modern stonemasons working with andesite use diamond-tipped tools and power equipment. The ancient builders achieved equivalent results using materials that, according to engineering principles, shouldn't have been capable of the task. Experimental archaeology has provided some answers while raising new questions. Researchers discovered that copper tools, while softer than andesite, can indeed cut the stone through a process called percussion drilling. By repeatedly striking the stone with copper chisels and using quartz sand as an abrasive, ancient craftsmen could slowly grind away the andesite. However, this process is extraordinarily time-consuming and requires constant tool replacement as the copper implements wear down. Creating a single precisely shaped block would have required months of labor by skilled workers. The volume of precision stonework at Puma Punku suggests a level of social organization that challenges conventional understanding of Tiwanaku society. If each block required months of skilled labor to produce, and the site contains hundreds of such blocks, the total labor investment would represent decades or even centuries of continuous work by specialized craftsmen. This implies a society capable of supporting professional stoneworkers who did nothing but practice their craft. Recent analysis using scanning electron microscopy has revealed microscopic details about the tool marks on the stones. The pattern suggests the builders used a variety of techniques depending on the specific task. Percussion for rough shaping, grinding for creating flat surfaces, and drilling for making holes. The transition between techniques left subtle traces that demonstrate systematic approaches to stoneworking. The builders weren't randomly chipping away at stone, but following established procedures that maximized efficiency while maintaining precision. Yet, despite decades of research using increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques, researchers still cannot fully explain how the ancient Tiwanaku achieved such extraordinary precision. The gap between their apparent capabilities and their available technology remains one of archaeology's most perplexing mysteries. The famous 8-shaped blocks at Puma Punku, weighing up to 600 kilograms each, fit together so precisely that a sheet of paper cannot be inserted between the joints. This level of accuracy requires not just skilled craftsmanship, but sophisticated understanding of geometry and measurement techniques. Ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed the full extent of the site beneath centuries of accumulated soil and debris. With the famous stone blocks representing only a small fraction of the original complex, the H blocks take their name from their distinctive shape, a rectangular block with notches cut into the sides, creating a form that resembles the letter H when viewed from above. These blocks served as connectors, joining other stones together in complex three-dimensional assemblies. Each H block required 6 precisely cut surfaces to be shaped to exact specifications, with all angles and dimensions coordinated to ensure proper fit. The geometric complexity of these pieces rivals modern prefabricated building components, yet they were created using Stone Age technology. The precision of the joints between H blocks and their neighboring stones suggests the builders used standardized measurement systems. Analysis of multiple H blocks reveals that certain dimensions repeat across different stones, indicating the use of standard units. This standardization would have required careful planning and quality control. Each craftsman needed to work to the same specifications to ensure that blocks created by different workers would fit together properly during assembly. Such standardization implies a sophisticated organizational structure, with master craftsmen establishing standards and supervising production. Computer modeling of the H-block assemblies has revealed their structural purpose. The interlocking design created joints that could withstand both tensile and compressive forces, allowing the structure to flex slightly during earthquakes without collapsing. The Tiwanaku region experiences frequent seismic activity, and the builder's engineering solution, creating flexible joints rather than rigid connections, demonstrates sophisticated understanding of how structures respond to ground motion. Modern earthquake-resistant design uses similar principles, though the ancient builders achieved these results through geometric innovation rather than mathematical calculation. The distribution of H-blocks throughout the site suggests they served specific architectural functions. Concentrations of H-blocks appear at points where different platform levels connected, indicating they were used to join major structural elements. Other H-blocks show evidence of having supported wooden beams or other architectural features that have since disappeared. The variety of H-block designs, some with deeper notches, others with different proportions, suggest they were custom designed for specific locations within the overall structure. Ground-penetrating radar surveys mapping the site's subsurface features revealed that the visible stone blocks represent only the uppermost level of a much larger complex. Beneath the surface lie additional platforms, walls, and possibly buried chambers that haven't been excavated. The radar data shows regular geometric patterns, suggesting deliberate planning of the entire site's layout. The discovery implies that Pumapunku was far more extensive than previously thought, with the famous H-blocks being just one component of an elaborate architectural complex. The transport and placement of the H-blocks presents its own mystery. Moving 600-kilogram stones across rough terrain and then positioning them with millimeter precision would have required specialized equipment and techniques. The blocks show no evidence of damage from dragging or dropping, suggesting they were handled with great care throughout the construction process. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that such stones can be moved using wooden rollers and ropes, but positioning them with the required precision would have been extraordinarily difficult. Recent excavations around H-block locations have uncovered evidence of the construction process. Researchers found stone chips and dust from the final fitting process, indicating that blocks were shaped at the quarry but underwent final adjustment at the construction site. This approach, rough shaping at the quarry, followed by precision work at the building location, mirrors modern construction practices and suggests sophisticated project management. The builders minimized the weight that needed to be transported while ensuring perfect fit through on-site adjustments. Chemical analysis of residues found in joints between H-blocks has revealed traces of compounds that may have served as lubricants or sealants. While the stones fit together without mortar, some joints show evidence of organic materials that could have eased the final placement or provided weatherproofing. The composition of these materials remains under study, but their presence indicates the builders used multiple techniques to ensure structural integrity beyond simple stone-on-stone contact. The symbolic significance of the H-block shape has been debated by archaeologists. Some researchers propose the form held religious meaning in Tiwanaku cosmology, while others argue it was purely functional. The truth may lie somewhere between. The builders may have chosen a shape that served both practical engineering needs and symbolic purposes. But one question dominates discussions of the H-blocks. How did Bronze Age builders achieve precision that challenges modern replication? Petrographic analysis of stone samples provided crucial insights into the builders' techniques. Under electron microscopy, researchers examined thin sections of the andesite blocks, studying the mineral composition and crystal structure. This analysis revealed tool marks invisible to casual observation, parallel striations and surface textures that indicated specific cutting methods and sequence of operations. The microscopic evidence showed that Pumapunku's builders used a combination of techniques to shape their stones, with initial rough shaping accomplished through controlled fracturing and final shaping involving grinding and polishing with harder abrasive materials. The microscopic tool marks preserve a detailed record of the ancient manufacturing process. Parallel scratches running in consistent directions indicate grinding motions, with the orientation of scratches showing how workers moved their tools across the stone surface. The depth and spacing of these marks vary depending on location, suggesting workers used different techniques for different parts of each block. Flat surfaces show fine, uniform scratches, indicating careful polishing. Corners and edges display deeper, more irregular marks from rougher shaping work. Electron microscopy revealed another crucial detail: the presence of foreign minerals embedded in the surface of work stones. These minerals didn't occur naturally in the andesite, but matched quartz sand found in the region. This evidence confirms that workers used quartz sand as an abrasive, working it against the stone surface with copper tools or wooden implements. The extreme hardness of quartz, 7 on the Mohs scale, allowed it to grind away the andesite, 6 to 7 on the same scale, providing the cutting mechanism that copper tools alone couldn't achieve. The sequence of operations became apparent through careful analysis of overlapping tool marks. The builders first rough-shaped blocks through controlled fracturing, using the natural grain and weakness planes in the andesite. Evidence of this technique appears as smooth fracture surfaces, showing conchoidal patterns, the characteristic ripples produced when stone breaks along its internal structure. After rough shaping, workers removed high spots through percussion, repeatedly striking the stone with harder hammers to chip away excess material. The transition from rough shaping to precision finishing shows in the changing character of tool marks. Deeper, more irregular marks from the early stages become progressively finer and more uniform, indicating a systematic refinement process. The final stages employed grinding and polishing techniques that left barely visible microscopic scratches, creating the mirror-smooth surfaces found on many blocks. This multi-stage process mirrors modern stoneworking practices, though accomplished with far more primitive tools. X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, detecting trace elements on stone surfaces, provided additional insights. The analysis revealed copper residues in patterns consistent with tool use, concentrated in areas where cutting and shaping occurred. The copper signatures helped researchers map exactly where and how craftsmen applied their tools. Some areas showed copper concentrations, suggesting hundreds of hours of contact between copper implements and stone, confirming the extraordinary time investment required for each block. Chemical weathering patterns on carved surfaces have been compared to understand the age of different parts of the site. Stone surfaces exposed to centuries of weathering developed distinctive chemical alteration patterns. By analyzing these patterns across multiple blocks, researchers determined that different parts of Puma Punku were carved at different times, supporting theories of multi-phase construction, spanning decades or centuries. The oldest carved surfaces show more extensive weathering than younger sections, providing relative chronology independent of other dating methods. Microscopic analysis also revealed evidence of thermal alteration on some stone surfaces. Localized heating changes the crystal structure of minerals in ways visible under microscopy. Some researchers have proposed that Tiwanaku builders used thermal shock techniques heating stone surfaces, then rapidly cooling them to induce fracturing. While controversial, microscopic evidence of thermal alteration in strategic locations supports this theory. Such techniques would have required sophisticated understanding of material properties and careful fire control. The distribution of different manufacturing techniques across the site suggests specialization among workers. Blocks requiring the most precise workshow tool mark patterns that match across multiple stones, indicating the same craftsman worked on similar components. Less critical, structural elements display more varied technique, possibly produced by less skilled workers or apprentices. This division of labor implies a hierarchical workshop organization, with master craftsmen supervising teams of workers. Recent advances in three-dimensional microscopy have allowed researchers to create detailed digital maps of tool mark patterns. These maps reveal information invisible even to high-powered optical microscopes, showing subtle variations in technique that distinguish individual craftsmen's work. The patterns suggest that while workers followed standardized procedures, each craftsman developed personal styles and preferences that left distinctive signatures in the stone. Yet microscopic analysis, for all its revelations, still cannot fully explain the precision achieved at Puma Punku. The evidence shows how the builders worked, but the question remains, how did they achieve such extraordinary accuracy without precision? Measuring instruments. In the year 1438, a young Inca prince named Kusi Yupanqui faced the greatest crisis of his life. Enemy warriors from the Chanca tribe had surrounded Cusco, leaving the city defenseless. When Pachacuti emerged victorious from that desperate battle, he immediately began planning the most ambitious construction project the Andes had ever seen. He would rebuild Cusco as the center of the world, and crowning this new capital would be a fortress so magnificent that it would serve as both a military stronghold and a sacred temple. Sacsayhuaman, meaning satisfied falcon in the Quechua language. The legend of that pivotal battle grew with each retelling. According to Inca oral tradition, Pachacuti called upon supernatural forces during the desperate fight against the Chanca. The stones of the battlefield itself rose up and transformed into warriors to fight alongside the outnumbered Inca defenders. Whether mythological embellishment or symbolic description of an unexpected military victory, the story established Pachacuti as a transformative figure whose vision would reshape Andean civilization. His first act after securing power was to reimagine Cusco not as a modest highland city, but as the capital of an empire that would eventually stretch over 2,500 miles. Sacsayhuaman's location above Cusco was carefully chosen for both practical and symbolic reasons. The site commanded views of the entire valley, providing military advantage while also establishing visual dominance over the landscape. But more importantly, the fortress formed the head of the puma, the sacred animal whose body was represented by Cusco's urban layout. The three massive zigzag walls were said to represent the puma's teeth, while the entire complex served as a gateway between the earthly realm and the world of the gods. This integration of military function with religious symbolism characterized all Inca architecture, but nowhere was it more dramatically realized than at Sacsayhuaman. Construction began around 1438 and continued for over 90 years, spanning the reigns of multiple Inca rulers. Spanish chronicler Pedro Chiesa de Leon, who visited the site in 1553, wrote that the Incas gathered 20,000 men from different provinces and worked them in shifts. Some quarried stones from the hillside, others transported them across difficult terrain, and still others shaped and fitted the massive blocks. The organization required to coordinate such a massive workforce represented one of the Inca Empire's greatest achievements, a sophisticated administrative system that could mobilize labor from across vast territories and maintain quality control over decades of continuous construction. The scale of individual stones defied comprehension. The largest blocks at Sacsayhuaman weigh an estimated 300 tons, yet they were transported from quarries located miles from the construction site. Spanish chroniclers, witnessing the ruins just decades after the fortress's completion, expressed amazement that such massive stones could be moved without wheels, draft animals, or iron tools. Some blocks were so large that they couldn't have been transported by fewer than several thousand men working in coordination, using rope systems and wooden rollers that left no archaeological trace. The cultural significance of Sacsayhuaman extended throughout the Inca Empire and beyond. The fortress served as a model for other Inca construction projects, with similar techniques and architectural principles applied to sites like Machu Picchu and Ollantaytambo. The methods developed at Sacsayhuaman, particularly the techniques for shaping and fitting stones without mortar, became hallmarks of Inca architecture. These techniques represented the culmination of Andean architectural traditions stretching back over 1,000 years. Refined and perfected under Pachacuti's ambitious vision, the fortress also functioned as a center for religious ceremonies that drew pilgrims from across the empire. Major festivals celebrating the sun god Inti took place in the courtyards and plazas of Sacsayhuaman, with thousands of participants gathering for rituals that reinforced the divine authority of the Sapa Inca. The combination of religious significance and military might made Sacsayhuaman a powerful symbol of Inca dominance, a physical manifestation of their empire's strength and spiritual legitimacy. Archaeological evidence suggests the site held significance even before Pachacuti's reconstruction. Earlier structures dating to the Quilque culture around 1100 CE have been found beneath Inca construction, indicating the location had been occupied for centuries. The Incas built upon and expanded these earlier foundations, incorporating pre-existing sacred geography into their grander vision. This continuity of occupation suggests the site's prominence derived from deep historical and spiritual associations that Pachacuti recognized and amplified through monumental architecture. The Spanish conquistadors who first saw Sacsayhuaman in 1533 struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. Some insisted the fortress must have been built by demons or giants, unable to conceive that human labor alone could accomplish such feats. Others recognized the achievement for what it was evidence of an indigenous civilization whose organizational capacity and technical skill rivaled or exceeded anything known in Europe. Yet the fortress that took 90 years to build would become a battleground that helped seal the Inca Empire's fate. Empire. The fortress played a crucial role in the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire. In 1536, during the Great Rebellion led by Manco Inca, Sacsayhuaman became the center of indigenous resistance. For months, Inca warriors held the stronghold against Spanish forces, using the massive walls and elevated position to rain down stones and arrows on their enemies. The siege became one of the most desperate battles of the conquest period. Only through the use of cavalry, steel weapons, and ultimately fire did the Spanish finally breach the defenses, marking the end of organized Inca resistance. The siege of Sacsayhuaman represented the Inca Empire's last coordinated attempt to expel the Spanish invaders. Manco Inca, having initially cooperated with the conquistadors, finally recognized that Spanish rule meant the end of Inca civilization. He gathered his forces and launched a surprise attack on Cusco in May 1536, quickly surrounding the city and trapping the Spanish garrison. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman, overlooking the city from its commanding height, became the key to controlling Cusco. Whoever held the fortress controlled the valley. Spanish accounts of the siege describe the fortress as nearly impregnable. The massive stone walls prevented cavalry charges, the Spanish' primary military advantage. Narrow entrances and steep approaches channeled attackers into killing zones where Inca warriors could rain down stones and arrows. The fortress's water supply and storage facilities allowed defenders to withstand extended siege, while its elevated position provided clear views of Spanish movements in the city below. For weeks, Spanish forces attempted to dislodge the Inca defenders without success. The turning point came when Spanish commander Juan Pizarro led a desperate assault using siege ladders and concentrated firepower. The attack succeeded in breaching the outer walls, but Juan Pizarro was mortally wounded by a stone that struck his jaw. His death enraged the Spanish forces, who pressed their attack with renewed ferocity. The battle raged through the fortress's multiple defensive levels, with Inca warriors falling back from one position to the next. Spanish accounts describe the Inca commander, a warrior named Cajude, fighting to the last moment before leaping to his death rather than surrendering. The capture of Sacsayhuaman marked the end of effective Inca military resistance. With the fortress in Spanish hands, Manco Inca's siege of Cusco became unsustainable. He withdrew to the mountains, beginning a guerrilla campaign that would continue for decades but never again threatened Spanish control of the former Inca heartland. The fortress that had taken 90 years to build and had stood as a symbol of Inca power fell in a matter of weeks, demonstrating the devastating impact of European military technology and tactics. The destruction during and after the siege was extensive. Spanish forces deliberately dismantled portions of the fortress to prevent its use by future rebels. Many of the finest cut stones were removed and repurposed for Spanish colonial buildings in Cusco. The circular tower, called Muyuk Marca, which had stood at the fortress's highest point, was completely dismantled. Spanish chroniclers described this tower as one of the most impressive structures in the entire complex, with multiple stories and architectural refinement that suggested it served as a royal residence or temple rather than purely military function. Archaeological evidence of the siege remains visible today. Scorch marks on some stones indicate the use of fire during the Spanish assault. Impact damage from projectiles marks walls that face the Spanish positions. Human remains found during excavations show signs of violent trauma, consistent with the battle described in historical accounts. These physical traces connect the archaeological site to the dramatic historical events that unfolded there, making Sacsayhuaman one of the few places where the archaeology of the Inca Empire intersects directly with documented colonial history. The fortress's loss had profound psychological impact on the indigenous population. Sacsayhuaman had represented the might of the Inca Empire, a physical manifestation of their civilization's achievements. Its fall symbolized the broader collapse of the Inca world. Spanish chroniclers noted that the indigenous population's resistance weakened considerably after Sacsayhuaman's capture, as people lost hope that Spanish rule could be overturned. The fortress that had been built to demonstrate Inca permanence and power became instead a monument to their civilization's tragic end. Post-conquest accounts describe Spanish officials expressing amazement at the fortress, even as they ordered its partial destruction. Some Spaniards argued for preserving Sacsayhuaman as evidence of the sophistication of the people they had conquered, perhaps seeking to justify their conquest of such an advanced civilization. Others viewed the fortress as a potential rallying point for future rebellions and advocated for its complete demolition. The compromise partial destruction of key defensive features, while leaving the massive walls largely intact, resulted in the ruins visible today. Modern analysis of the damage inflicted during the siege reveals the fortress's impressive defensive design. The massive walls, built without mortar, proved remarkably resistant to both projectile weapons and deliberate demolition. The interlocking stone construction, which allowed slight movement during earthquakes, also provided resilience against military assault. The walls that had been designed to last forever had witnessed the end of the civilization that built them. The construction techniques used at Sacsayhuaman revealed the sophisticated knowledge systems of the Inca Empire. The builders understood principles of seismic engineering that allowed their structures to survive centuries of earthquakes. They developed methods for quarrying, transporting, and shaping massive stones that required precise coordination of thousands of workers. Archaeological investigations have revealed that Sacsayhuaman was far more than just a military fortress. The complex included residential areas, storage facilities, religious temples, and ceremonial spaces that represented a miniature version of the Inca cosmos. The seismic engineering of Sacsayhuaman represents one of its most remarkable technical achievements. The Andes region experiences frequent earthquakes, some of devastating magnitude. Cusco has been struck by major earthquakes multiple times since the Spanish conquest, with tremors destroying colonial buildings while Inca structures remain standing. The secret lies in the construction technique: massive stones fitted together without mortar, with slightly irregular surfaces that allow individual blocks to shift and settle during ground motion without the structure collapsing. The fitting of stones at Sacsayhuaman achieves precision that still puzzles engineers. Blocks weighing hundreds of tons nestle together with joints so tight that a knife blade cannot slip between them. The surfaces aren't simply flat, they feature complex three-dimensional curves and angles that interlock in ways that distribute weight and resist both vertical and lateral forces. Modern attempts to replicate this stonework using traditional tools have succeeded only with great difficulty and enormous time investment, suggesting the Inca possessed specialized knowledge passed down through generations of master stonemasons. The quarrying methods demonstrate sophisticated understanding of geology. The Incas exploited natural weakness planes in the limestone, using wooden wedges and thermal shock to fracture stone along predetermined lines. Evidence from quarries shows that workers shaped stones to rough specifications at the quarry site before transporting them, minimizing the weight that needed to be moved. Final shaping occurred at the construction site, where blocks were gradually ground against each other until achieving perfect fit. This process required immense patience. Some estimates suggest that fitting a single large block could take a team of workers months of continuous effort. The transportation of massive stones across difficult Andean terrain required innovations in logistics and organization. Spanish chroniclers describe the use of thousands of workers pulling stones with ropes, using log rollers to reduce friction. Archaeological evidence suggests the Incas also built temporary ramps and roads specifically for moving construction materials. The coordination required ensuring that thousands of people pulled together in rhythm, maintained control of massive moving stones, and safely delivered them to the construction site, represents organizational achievement, rivaling the technical challenges of stoneworking itself. The water management system at Sacsayhuaman demonstrates advanced hydraulic engineering. Stone channels carried water from springs in the mountains to storage facilities within the fortress. These channels maintained precise gradients over long distances, ensuring consistent flow without erosion or overflow. Underground drainage systems prevented water accumulation that could undermine foundations. The sophistication of these water management features indicates that Inca engineers understood principles of hydraulics and hydrology, applying this knowledge to ensure the fortress remained habitable during extended occupation. The residential areas within the complex reveal careful planning for both functionality and social hierarchy. Elite quarters featured finely cut stone and access to the best views and water supplies. Common workers' areas used rougher stonework, but still displayed the characteristic Inca attention to fitting and stability. Storage facilities were positioned to protect food supplies from moisture and pests while remaining accessible during siege conditions. This differentiation of spaces shows that Sacsayhuaman served as a functioning community, not merely a military installation. The religious significance of the site permeates its design. Carved stones marked astronomical alignments, connecting the fortress to celestial patterns the Incas used for their calendar and religious ceremonies. Ceremonial plazas could accommodate thousands of participants in rituals that reinforced the divine authority of the Sapa Inca. The integration of religious and military functions made Sacsayhuaman a powerful symbol, a place where earthly power derived from and reflected cosmic order. Recent archaeological investigations using ground-penetrating radar have revealed previously unknown structures beneath the visible ruins. These subsurface features include possible chambers, passages, and foundations that suggest the fortress was even more extensive than surface ruins indicate. Some of these buried structures may predate Inca construction, representing earlier occupation by the Quilca culture. Others appear to be Inca construction that was deliberately buried or collapsed over time. The fortress's design also incorporated sophisticated astronomical observations, Certain stone formations align with solstice sunrises and sunsets, while others mark the rising and setting positions of significant stars. These alignments weren't merely decorative, they served practical purposes for the Inca calendar system and religious observances. Yet despite centuries of study, the full extent of Inca engineering knowledge remains partially mysterious. When English antiquarian Robert Wood first laid eyes on the ruins of Baalbek in the summer of 1751, he was witnessing what he called the most stupendous remains of antiquity. Standing before three enormous stone blocks, each weighing over 800 tons and fitted together with impossible precision, Wood wrote descriptions that would spark decades of debate. The mystery deepened when he discovered that these massive blocks weren't just scattered ruins, they were integral parts of a temple complex that represented the pinnacle of Roman architectural achievement. Wood had travelled for months through the Ottoman Empire, enduring bandits, harsh weather, and political upheaval to reach this remote Lebanese site. His journey was driven by rumours of ancient ruins that surpassed anything known in the classical world. When he finally arrived at Baalbek, even his elevated expectations couldn't prepare him for what he found. The temple complex sprawled across acres of elevated ground, with columns still standing that dwarfed Roman structures in Italy, but it was the foundation stones that truly captured his attention, blocks of such massive size that they seemed to defy the capabilities of any ancient civilization. The publication of Wood's account in 1757, titled The Ruins of Baalbek, became the first detailed European description of the site. His carefully measured drawings and descriptions sparked intense debate about how ancient builders could have moved and positioned stones that dwarfed anything found elsewhere in the Roman world. Some scholars dismissed his measurements as exaggerations. Others proposed that the stones must predate Roman civilization entirely, perhaps built by some lost advanced culture. The mystery of Baalbek had entered Western consciousness, where it would remain for centuries. The formal archaeological investigation of Baalbek began in earnest in the late 19th century. German Kaiser Wilhelm II, fascinated by the site's mysteries, authorized the first systematic excavations in 1898. A team led by Otto Puchstein arrived with the ambitious goal of completely uncovering and documenting the ancient complex. What they found, over 7 years of intensive excavation, exceeded even the most optimistic expectations. The site contained not just one temple but an entire sacred complex covering over 20 acres, representing the largest religious structure in the Roman Empire. The Temple of Jupiter, built during the reign of Emperor Augustus, stood as the centerpiece of this complex. Its foundation incorporated the famous trilithon 3 limestone blocks, weighing between 750 and 800 tons each. These blocks were positioned 20 feet above ground level, embedded in a foundation wall that supported the temple structure above. The precision of the joints between the trilithon blocks astonished the German archaeologists. Gaps between stones measured less than a millimeter in most places, with the massive blocks fitted together as precisely as fine furniture joinery. But the excavations revealed something even more remarkable in the nearby quarry. 3 additional blocks had been cut and shaped, but never transported to the temple site. The largest of these, dubbed the Stone of the Pregnant Woman in local tradition, weighed an estimated 1,000 tons. Later discoveries would reveal an even larger block, weighing approximately 1,650 tons, making it the heaviest worked stone block in the world. These abandoned stones provided crucial evidence about Roman quarrying techniques, while raising profound questions about the limits of ancient engineering capabilities. The quarry site sits at a slightly higher elevation than the temple complex, meaning the blocks could theoretically be moved downhill using controlled slides and ramps. Deep grooves cut into the stone blocks show where ropes and lifting devices had been attached. The Romans had developed systematic approaches to megalithic construction, combining careful planning with innovative engineering solutions. Yet the scale of the Baalbek blocks pushed even Roman capabilities to their apparent limits. The abandoned stones suggest the builders were attempting to transport increasingly massive blocks until they reached the point where the stones simply couldn't be moved with available technology. Archaeological analysis of the construction site has revealed evidence of the massive workforce required for the project. Inscriptions found at the site mention specific work crews and their supervisors. Infrastructure remains include workshops, storage facilities, and what appear to be temporary housing for workers. The scale of organization required rivals modern construction projects, suggesting that the Roman Empire at its peak possessed administrative and logistical capabilities that allowed it to undertake projects that would challenge civilizations for centuries afterward. The religious significance of the massive construction becomes apparent when considering the temple's dedication. Jupiter Heliopolitanus, the deity worshipped at Baalbek, represented a fusion of Roman Jupiter with local Semitic gods. The enormous scale of the temple complex was intended to demonstrate the power and permanence of Roman rule in the region. The massive stones served both practical and symbolic functions, creating a monument that would inspire awe in visitors for centuries to come and establishing Roman authority through architectural supremacy. Recent scientific analysis using modern imaging techniques has provided new insights into the construction methods. Ground-penetrating radar has identified ancient road systems used to transport the blocks from quarry to temple site. Yet the fundamental mystery remains. How did Roman engineers accomplish what modern construction would find extraordinarily challenging? The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek stood as the largest religious structure in the Roman Empire. Its foundation incorporated the famous trilithon 3 limestone blocks, weighing between 750 and 800 tons each, positioned 20 feet above ground level and fitted together with joints so precise that a knife blade could not slip between them. But excavations revealed something even more remarkable. In the nearby quarry, archaeologists found 3 additional blocks that had been cut and shaped but never transported. The largest of these, dubbed the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighed an estimated 1,000 tons. The weight of the trilithon blocks challenges comprehension. 800 tons equals the weight of roughly 110 elephants, or about 3 modern commercial airliners fully loaded with passengers and fuel. Moving such masses would strain modern heavy construction equipment. The Romans accomplished the task using wooden rollers, rope systems, human labor, and engineering principles that left minimal archaeological trace. The achievement becomes even more remarkable when considering the blocks were not simply moved horizontally, but lifted 20 feet above ground level and positioned with millimeter precision in the foundation wall. The precision of the joints between trilithon blocks suggests sophisticated surveying and measuring techniques. Each block had to be cut to exact specifications to ensure proper fit. The surfaces where blocks met were shaped to create tight joints that would distribute weight evenly and prevent shifting over time. This precision required not only skilled stoneworking but also accurate measurement systems and quality control procedures. Roman engineers would have needed to verify dimensions at multiple points during the cutting process, making adjustments to ensure that blocks shaped at the quarry would fit perfectly when assembled at the construction site. Friedrich Raget, who worked at the site in the 1970 seconds, made crucial discoveries about the construction sequence. His analysis revealed that the trilithon blocks were not simply placed on top of smaller stones, but were actually incorporated into the foundation during the initial construction phase. This finding challenged theories that the massive blocks had been added later or represented repairs to earlier structures. The blocks were part of the original design, indicating that the Romans planned from the beginning to use the largest stones they could possibly move. The engineering challenges of positioning the trilithon blocks involved multiple coordinated operations. Workers first had to excavate and prepare the foundation trench to exact specifications. Smaller stones were laid to create a stable base. The massive trilithon blocks were then maneuvered into position, likely using earth ramps that were gradually built up and later removed. The blocks had to be lowered precisely into place, with workers making minute adjustments to ensure proper alignment and fit. The final positioning would have required hundreds of workers operating in perfect coordination, following directions from master engineers who could visualize the entire process. The discovery of partially worked stones in the quarry provides insights into Roman stoneworking techniques. The largest abandoned block shows clear evidence of the cutting process channels carved around the stone's perimeter to separate it from the surrounding bedrock. The channels were created by workers using iron tools to split the limestone along natural weakness planes. Once separated from the bedrock, the stone would have been shaped to rough specifications before the attempt to transport it. The fact that this largest block was never moved suggests the Romans recognized it exceeded their transportation capabilities, providing a definite upper limit to Roman megalithic engineering. Modern engineering analysis has attempted to determine how the Romans could have moved such massive stones. computer simulations show that the blocks could theoretically be moved using wooden rollers and ramps, with several thousand workers pulling together on rope systems. The key challenges involve maintaining control of such massive moving objects, preventing the rollers from being crushed under the weight, and coordinating the efforts of thousands of people pulling in unison. Modern engineers estimate that moving an 800-ton block would require between 2,000 and 5,000 workers, depending on the technique used and the terrain crossed. The structural analysis using finite element modeling tested various theories about the original building design. Computer simulations revealed that the scattered blocks could indeed have formed stable architectural structures, but only if assembled in specific configurations. The analysis helped identify which blocks belonged together and how the original buildings might have appeared. The findings consistently pointed to sophisticated engineering knowledge that Romans possessed and applied at scales that tested the limits of their capabilities. Excavations have also uncovered evidence of lifting techniques. Stone blocks show grooves where ropes attached, and some retain metal clamps that connected adjacent stones. The patterns of these features reveal systematic approaches to stone handling. The Romans used different techniques depending on the size and weight of stones. Smaller blocks could be lifted with simple lever systems, while the massive trilithon blocks required more sophisticated approaches that archaeological evidence hasn't yet fully revealed. The religious and political motivations for using such massive stones become apparent when considering the temple's purpose. The Romans wanted to create the most impressive temple in their empire, demonstrating their engineering capabilities and religious devotion, while overawing local populations with their power. Yet after centuries of study, the exact methods used to position the trilithon blocks remain subjects of debate. In 2014, archaeologists uncovered a third massive block in the quarry, even larger than the stone of the pregnant woman. This block, measuring 64 feet long and weighing over 1,200 tons, was apparently abandoned after partial completion. The discovery suggests that Roman engineers were pushing the limits of their capabilities, attempting to transport increasingly massive stones. This revelation adds new dimensions to our understanding of Roman ambition and the technical challenges they were willing to undertake in demonstrating imperial power. The 2014 discovery occurred during routine documentation of the Baalbek quarry site. Archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar detected an anomaly beneath accumulated soil and debris. Excavation revealed the largest worked stone block ever found anywhere in the world. At 64 feet long, 19.6 feet wide, and 18 feet high, the block dwarfed even the massive trilithon stones already incorporated into the temple foundation. The sheer scale of this abandoned giant raised profound questions about Roman engineering ambitions and the factors that led them to abandon the stone after investing enormous effort in cutting and shaping it. The partially completed state of the block provided crucial evidence about Roman quarrying techniques. 3 sides had been completely separated from the bedrock through a process of cutting channels around the stone's perimeter. The 4th side remained partially attached, suggesting work stopped before the block could be fully extracted. Tool marks visible on the cut surfaces show the systematic approach Roman workers used, creating deep vertical channels, then using wedges to split the stone along its natural grain. The precision of these cuts demonstrates sophisticated understanding of limestone's structural properties and how to exploit them for efficient quarrying. The abandonment of such a massive stone after significant work investment suggests the Romans recognized practical limits to their capabilities. Modern engineering calculations indicate that moving a 1,200-ton block would require at least 5,000 workers pulling together, possibly more depending on terrain and transport methods. The logistics of coordinating such a massive workforce, combined with the challenges of controlling such an enormous moving mass, may have convinced Roman engineers that the stone exceeded safe transportation limits. The decision to abandon the block rather than risk catastrophic failure during transport demonstrates practical judgment alongside ambition. The discovery has sparked renewed debate about Roman motivations and capabilities. Some researchers argue the increasingly large stones represent competitive pressure among Roman engineers to demonstrate their skills through ever more impressive achievements. Others suggest religious motivations. Each successive emperor or project sponsor wanted to surpass previous offerings to the gods. Still others propose that the massive stones served propaganda purposes, demonstrating Roman power through engineering feats that seemed to defy natural limits. The truth likely combines all these factors, with the abandoned giant standing as testimony to the moment when ambition finally exceeded capability. Recent analysis using photogrammetry and three-dimensional modeling has revealed additional details about the stone's intended use. The block's dimensions and shape suggest it was designed as a foundation stone, possibly intended to extend the trilithon even further. If successfully transported and positioned, it would have created the most massive architectural foundation ever built in the ancient world. The fact that Romans even attempted such a project reveals engineering confidence built on centuries of successful megalithic construction throughout their empire. Yet this confidence met its limits in the Baalbek quarry, where the largest stone block ever shaped still lies, waiting for a transportation method that ancient engineers never developed. Imagine sailing through the Pacific Ocean and stumbling upon something that shouldn't exist. A city built entirely on water, with massive stone walls rising from coral reefs. This is Nan Madol, off the coast of Pohnpei in Micronesia. The mystery isn't just about the engineering, it's about the sheer impossibility of what we're seeing. We're talking about 92 artificial islands connected by canals, built from basalt columns that weigh up to 50 tons each. Some estimates suggest the entire complex contains over 250 million tons of stone material. The scale of Nan Madol becomes apparent only when viewing it from above. The artificial islands spread across 170 acres of shallow reef flat, with stone walls rising directly from the coral. The main islands cluster in the northeast portion of the complex, connected by a network of canals that create a Venice-like water city in the middle of the Pacific. Each island served specific purposes: residential areas for elite families, ceremonial centers, food preparation zones, and burial grounds. The spatial organization suggests sophisticated urban planning that required coordinating construction across multiple islands to create a functioning community. The basalt columns used to build Nan Madol came from volcanic formations, naturally fractured into hexagonal or pentagonal prisms through the cooling process of ancient lava flows. These columnar formations made the basalt easier to handle than irregular stones, as the columns could be stacked like giant Lincoln logs. However, this advantage in construction was offset by the material's density and the distances involved in transportation. Basalt is significantly denser than many other building stones, meaning even modest-sized columns could weigh several tons. Radiocarbon dating shows that major construction at Nan Madol began around 1180 AD, during the rise of the Sordolo dynasty. Chemical analysis of the basalt stones confirms they came from Soka's Rock, a volcanic plug on the opposite side of the island. The builders worked for several centuries, gradually expanding the complex until it reached its peak around 1500 AD. At its height, Nan Madol may have housed up to 1,000 people, with many more living on the main island and travelling to the artificial islands for work or ceremonies. The engineering challenges of building on coral reefs added complexity to an already difficult project. The builders had to account for tidal variations, wave action, and the structural limitations of building on uneven coral foundations. The walls were constructed using a technique called cribbing, stacking the basalt columns in alternating layers to create stable structures. Coral rubble was used to fill gaps and provide additional stability. This construction method created walls that could flex slightly with wave motion without collapsing, similar to the mortarless stone construction used by other ancient civilizations in earthquake-prone regions. The precision of the construction becomes evident when examining individual structures. Walls rise vertically from the water with remarkable straightness, suggesting the use of measuring and leveling techniques. Corners meet at precise right angles. Canals maintain consistent widths and depths. This uniformity across 92 separate islands indicates centralized planning and quality control standards that all work crews followed. Such organization requires administrative structures capable of coordinating hundreds of workers across multiple construction sites over extended periods. The discovery of extensive underwater structures around Nan Madol adds another layer to the mystery. Archaeologists have found basalt columns on the seafloor, leading some to speculate that parts of the complex were built during periods of lower sea level, or that construction accidents left stones scattered across the ocean floor. Yet the fundamental question remains unanswered. How did ancient Pacific Islanders accomplish this extraordinary feat of marine engineering? According to Pohnpeian oral tradition, twin sorcerers named Olisishpa and Olosopa built Nan Madol using magic. The stories tell of massive basalt stones flying through the air, guided by supernatural forces. While this might sound like folklore, these oral histories have been passed down for over 1,000 years, and they consistently describe the same impossible feat: stones moving without human effort. Modern science demands more practical explanations, but the challenge remains. How did ancient people transport and position millions of tons of basalt across water to build this floating city? The consistency of the oral traditions across generations suggests they preserve genuine cultural memory, even if expressed through mythological language. In many cultures, extraordinary human achievements are attributed to supernatural forces because the actual methods seemed so remarkable to later generations that they appeared magical. The flying stones of Pohnpeian legend may represent a poetic description of stones transported by methods that seemed impossible to those who witnessed them. Perhaps rafts that made heavy stones appear to float effortlessly, or pulley systems that lifted stones in ways that seemed to defy gravity. The sorcerer twins feature prominently in Pohnpeian mythology as culture heroes who brought advanced knowledge to the island. According to tradition, they travelled from a distant land, bringing with them the knowledge needed to build Nan Madol. This element of the legend may preserve memories of outside influences or technological innovations that transformed local building practices. Some researchers have proposed connections between Micronesian and Polynesian cultures, suggesting that boat building and seafaring technologies could have facilitated the exchange of construction techniques across vast Pacific distances. Modern investigations have focused on finding practical explanations that could account for the legendary descriptions. Some researchers propose that the ancients used the tides to their advantage, timing stone movements to coincide with high tide, when water depths would be greatest and buoyancy could assist in transportation. Others suggest that the natural columnar structure of basalt might have allowed stones to be rolled across log tracks, creating movement that appeared almost magical in its efficiency. Still others point to the possibility of sophisticated raft designs that could support massive weights while remaining maneuverable in shallow waters. The legend also describes the sorcerers using magical spells to make the stones light enough to position precisely. This element may preserve memories of leverage techniques or counterweight systems that reduced the effective weight workers needed to move. Ancient peoples worldwide developed sophisticated mechanical advantage systems using simple tools, ropes, wooden levers, and inclined planes. Applied cleverly, these tools could accomplish feats that seem to defy physics to observers unfamiliar with the underlying principles. Recent archaeological work has searched for physical evidence that might support or refute various theories about construction methods. Researchers have found no evidence of massive ramps or causeways that would indicate overland transport. No large timber remains suggest the presence of enormous rafts or flotation devices. The absence of expected archaeological evidence makes the construction methods even more mysterious, lending a certain credibility to local traditions that describe methods beyond ordinary human capabilities. The challenge for modern archaeology is explaining how the stones were moved without leaving traces that would survive in the archaeological record. The symbolic significance of attributing Nan Madol's construction to magic reflects the structure's importance in Pohnpeian culture. The city served as the ceremonial and political center of the Sodelur dynasty for several centuries. By crediting supernatural forces with its creation, the oral traditions reinforce the sacred status of the site, while acknowledging the extraordinary achievement represented by its construction. But stripped of mythology, the question remains, what actual methods allowed ancient builders to create this marine architectural wonder? The most widely accepted theory among archaeologists is the raft transport method. Researchers proposed that ancient builders quarried the basalt columns from Soka's rock, then floated them on large rafts across the lagoon. The basalt's natural columnar structure would have made it easier to handle, and the buoyancy of the rafts could have supported the massive weight. But the distance from the quarry to Nan Madol is approximately 10 miles across open ocean and coral reefs. Building rafts capable of carrying 50-ton stones would require massive logs that Pohnpei's tropical environment doesn't produce. The raft theory's fundamental challenge involves the relationship between available materials and required performance. Coconut palms and breadfruit trees, the largest timber available on Pohnpei, rarely exceed 2 feet in diameter. Constructing rafts capable of supporting multi-ton stones would require lashing together dozens of logs, creating structures that would be difficult to maneuver and vulnerable to wave action. Experimental archaeology attempts to recreate ancient raft designs using local materials have demonstrated the theoretical feasibility of floating substantial weights, but these experiments typically used much smaller stones than the largest examples found at Nanmadol. An alternative version of the raft theory proposes that builders used canoe-like hulls rather than simple log rafts. Polynesian and Micronesian cultures developed sophisticated outrigger canoe designs, capable of carrying heavy cargo across open ocean. By lashing together multiple large canoes and creating a platform across them, ancient builders might have achieved greater stability and carrying capacity than simple raft designs. This approach would require fewer large logs while providing better control in ocean conditions. However, no direct evidence of such canoe-raft hybrids exists in the archaeological or ethnographic record. The navigation challenges of transporting stones across 10 miles of open water add complexity to any raft-based theory. Currents around Pohnpei can be strong and unpredictable. Weather conditions change rapidly in tropical Pacific waters. A raft or flotilla carrying a 50-ton stone would have limited maneuverability and could be easily swept off course or capsized by waves. The risk of losing valuable cargo, not to mention endangering the lives of the crew, would have been substantial. Yet if raft transport was used, ancient builders apparently accepted these risks and successfully completed thousands of delivery trips without suffering catastrophic losses that would have left evidence on the ocean floor. Timing transportation to coincide with favorable conditions may have been crucial to success. Traditional Pacific Islander cultures developed sophisticated knowledge of seasonal weather patterns, current cycles, and tidal rhythms. By scheduling stone transport during periods of calm seas and favorable currents, ancient builders could have minimized risks while maximizing the effectiveness of raft transport. Such scheduling would require patience and careful observation, but would align with the multi-generational timescale of Nanmadol's construction. The final positioning of stones presents additional challenges for raft-based theories. Even if stones were successfully transported to the construction site, they would need to be unloaded and positioned precisely on the growing walls. Rafts would need to navigate through partially completed canal systems while carrying heavy cargo. The logistics of these operations, repeated thousands of times, represent engineering challenges as significant as the transportation itself. Recent investigations using underwater archaeology have searched for evidence of ancient transport methods. Researchers hope to find abandoned stones, remains of rafts, or other artifacts that might reveal how transportation was accomplished. The searchers have found scattered basalt columns on the seafloor, but their positions and conditions don't conclusively support any particular transport theory. The raft transport theory remains the most widely accepted explanation, yet significant questions about its practical implementation remain unresolved. When farmer Yan Daocheng and his son were digging an irrigation channel in their field near Guanghan City in Sichuan province in 1929, their tools hit something hard buried in the mud. What they pulled from that ditch were jade artifacts unlike anything seen before in China. The farmer had no idea he'd just discovered the first traces of the Sangqingdui civilization, a Bronze Age culture that would challenge everything archaeologists thought they knew about ancient China. The jade pieces sat in the farmer's home for years, largely forgotten, until formal excavations began in 1986. The 1,929 discovery remained largely unknown outside the local area for decades. The farmer showed the jade pieces to neighbors and occasional visitors, but in an era of political instability and limited archaeological infrastructure in rural China, the significance went unrecognized. The objects included jade rings, ceremonial blades, and carved ornaments displaying craftsmanship that suggested ancient ritual use. These pieces represented the first material evidence of a civilization that had been completely forgotten by history, existing outside the narrative of Chinese development that archaeologists had constructed based on sites in northern China. The transformation of understanding began in 1986, when construction workers encountered something unexpected while expanding a brick factory near the site of the original 1,929 discovery. Heavy machinery uncovered what appeared to be a concentration of ancient objects buried in a pit. This time, local authorities immediately contacted archaeological teams, and formal excavation began within days. What emerged from that pit would shock the archaeological world: thousands of bronze, jade, and gold artifacts in styles completely unlike anything known from contemporaneous Chinese civilizations. The excavation of the first sacrificial pit revealed bronze masks unlike any previous Chinese artifacts. The masks featured exaggerated features, enormous eyes that seemed to bulge from the faces, ears that extended sideways to supernatural proportions, and elaborate decorations suggesting ritual or ceremonial significance. The largest masks measured over 4 feet wide, requiring extraordinary technical skill to cast in bronze. The artistic style bore no relationship to the contemporaneous Shang dynasty bronzes from northern China, suggesting the Sanxingdui people developed their artistic traditions independently. A second pit discovered nearby in 1986 contained even more spectacular finds, including a bronze sacred tree nearly 13 feet tall. The tree featured multiple branches with birds perched among them, and its trunk was decorated with symbols whose meanings remain mysterious. The craftsmanship demonstrated sophisticated bronze casting techniques using the lost wax method, where complex forms are first modeled in wax, encased in clay, then heated to melt away the wax before molten bronze is poured into the void. This technique allows creation of intricate forms impossible to achieve through simpler casting methods. The 1,986 discoveries initiated decades of intensive study and continued excavation. Researchers determined that the artifacts dated to approximately 1,200 to 1000 BCE, making them contemporaneous with China's Shang dynasty, but displaying completely different artistic and cultural traditions. The site covered over 12 square kilometers and featured massive earthen walls, suggesting a major urban center. The reasons for this amnesia remain debated. Some researchers suggest that Sanxingdui's civilization was deliberately suppressed or absorbed by expanding kingdoms from northern China. Others propose that environmental changes or internal collapse led to the city's abandonment, with survivors dispersing and their cultural traditions gradually being forgotten. But the discovery of this forgotten civilization has revolutionized understanding of ancient China, revealing a level of cultural diversity and sophistication that previous archaeological models had failed to recognize. When formal excavations began in 1986, what archaeologists found defied all expectations. 2 massive sacrificial pits emerged from the earth, filled with thousands of bronze artifacts that looked like nothing else in Chinese archaeology. Bronze masks with bulging eyes and enormous ears, some measuring over 4 feet wide, standing bronze figures with elongated faces and mysterious expressions. Most stunning of all was a bronze sacred tree nearly 13 feet tall, with birds perched on its branches and strange symbols decorating its trunk, craftsmanship so extraordinary it seemed to come from another world. The excavation process revealed that these weren't random burials but carefully arranged sacrificial deposits. The artifacts had been deliberately broken and burned before being placed in the pits, suggesting complex ritual practices. Elephant tusks, cowrie shells, and jade objects were layered among the bronze pieces, indicating trade connections that stretched across vast distances. The presence of elephant ivory was particularly puzzling. Elephants hadn't lived in this region for thousands of years, suggesting the Sanxingdui people had extensive trade networks reaching into Southeast Asia. The bronze sacred tree stood as the pit's most spectacular discovery. Its branches extended at multiple levels, each supporting bronze ornaments including birds, flowers, and mysterious hanging objects. The trunk featured decorative bands with symbols that may represent writing or ritual markings. The entire tree was cast in sections using sophisticated bronze working techniques, then assembled with remarkable precision. No comparable artifact exists anywhere in Chinese archaeology, making the sacred tree a unique window into Sanxingdui religious beliefs and artistic capabilities. Standing bronze figures discovered in the pits showed equally remarkable craftsmanship. The largest figure stood nearly 9 feet tall when mounted on its pedestal, depicting a person in elaborate ceremonial dress with hands positioned as if holding something now lost. The figure's face featured the characteristic Sanxingdui style, prominent eyes, angular features, and an expression suggesting ritual solemnity. Smaller figures showed similar artistic conventions, indicating a consistent artistic tradition rather than individual expression. The sheer quantity of artifacts overwhelmed the excavation teams. The 2 pits contained over 1,000 objects, with many broken into fragments that required years of conservation work to reassemble. Gold masks, bronze bells, jade blades, and countless other objects emerged from the soil, each one adding pieces to the puzzle of Sanxingdui culture. The concentration of valuable materials in the pits suggested they represented the culmination of decades or centuries of accumulated wealth, destroyed in massive ritual events whose purposes remain mysterious. The discovery sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Traditional narratives of Chinese civilization development centered on the Yellow River Valley in northern China, where the Shang and Zhou dynasties established cultural patterns that influenced later Chinese history. Sanxingdui revealed that sophisticated Bronze Age civilizations had developed independently in other regions, creating distinct artistic and cultural traditions that challenged the idea of a single, unified Chinese cultural origin. But questions immediately arose. Who were these people? And why had their remarkable civilization been completely forgotten by later Chinese dynasties? What made these discoveries so revolutionary wasn't just their beauty, but their complete uniqueness. The bronze masks bore no resemblance to any known Chinese artistic tradition. The faces were otherworldly, some with protruding eyes that seemed to stare into another dimension, others with elaborate decorations that suggested religious or ceremonial significance. The style was so different from contemporaneous Chinese Bronze Age artifacts that some archaeologists initially questioned whether they were even Chinese at all, raising profound questions about the diversity of ancient civilizations in this region. The most striking masks featured eyes that protruded several inches from the face on cylindrical stalks, creating an appearance unlike anything in naturalistic human portraiture. Some researchers interpreted these as representing supernatural beings or shamanic visions, while others suggested they might depict actual masks worn during ceremonies. The exaggerated features transcended mere artistic style. They seemed to represent a completely different visual language for depicting the sacred or supernatural. The technical achievement of creating these masks rivaled their artistic impact. Bronze casting of such large, complex forms required sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. The alloy composition had to be precisely controlled. Too much tin made the bronze brittle. Too little made it too soft for fine detail. The masks were cast using piece mold techniques, where clay molds were assembled around a core, then filled with molten bronze. After cooling, the molds were broken away to reveal the finished piece. Creating molds for the complex three-dimensional forms of these masks required master craftsmen capable of visualizing how the final piece would emerge from the casting process. Gold foil covered some masks, adding another layer of technical complexity and suggesting these objects held extraordinary ritual significance. The gold was hammered into thin sheets, then carefully applied to the bronze surface. This combination of materials, bronze covered with gold, appeared in other ancient cultures as a way of enhancing ritual objects, but the Sanxingdui examples showed refinement, suggesting long tradition and specialized expertise. Beyond the masks, the pits contained bronze heads mounted on poles, suggesting they may have been carried in processions or displayed during ceremonies. These heads showed the same stylistic conventions as the masks' elongated faces, prominent features, and expressions suggesting ritual solemnity. The consistency of style across multiple objects indicated a established artistic tradition, rather than experimental work, implying that Sanxingdui culture had developed over considerable time before the creation of these particular pieces. The complete absence of comparable artifacts from other Chinese sites of the same period emphasizes Sanxingdui's uniqueness. While Shang dynasty bronzes from northern China featured elaborate decorations of dragons, mythical creatures, and geometric patterns, Sanxingdui bronzes displayed human-like faces with surreal features. This stylistic divergence suggests that Sanxingdui culture developed in relative isolation from northern Chinese civilizations, creating its own artistic language for expressing religious and cultural concepts. The mystery deepens when considering that this distinctive artistic tradition apparently disappeared without influencing later Chinese art. No clear descendants of Sanxingdui style appear in subsequent periods, suggesting the civilization's cultural traditions died out or were suppressed rather than evolving into later forms. Yet the artistry preserved in those buried pits reveals a Bronze Age civilization whose creativity and technical skill matched or exceeded anything produced by their contemporaries. Imagine a civilization at its absolute peak, cities stretching as far as the eye can see, filled with towering pyramids that pierced the jungle canopy, markets bustling with traders carrying goods from across Mesoamerica. This was the Maya world during the Classic period, from 250 to 900 AD, a time when Maya civilization reached heights that wouldn't be matched in the Americas for centuries. Recent studies suggest the Maya lands may have supported between 7 to 11 million people at their peak. The Maya weren't just another ancient society, they were mathematical geniuses who invented the concept of zero independently from the old world. They developed the most accurate calendar system in human history, predicting eclipses thousands of years into the future. Their cities, Tikal, Palenque, Caracol, Calakmul, were engineering marvels that supported populations larger than many European cities of the time. The urban density in some Maya regions exceeded that of contemporary medieval Europe, with sophisticated water management, agricultural systems, and architectural achievements that reflected centuries of accumulated knowledge. The agricultural system was a masterpiece of environmental engineering. The Maya transformed vast areas of jungle into productive farmland, using techniques that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. Raised fields and wetlands captured silt and nutrients while providing drainage. Sophisticated irrigation systems channeled water from cenotes and seasonal streams. These techniques supported population densities that seemed impossible in tropical rainforest environments, demonstrating the Maya's deep understanding of their ecosystem. The political system was equally complex. Rather than a single empire, the Maya world consisted of dozens of city-states, each ruled by divine kings who claimed descent from the gods. These rulers waged elaborate wars, formed shifting alliances, and competed for prestige through massive building projects. The hieroglyphic texts, carved on their monuments, tell stories of royal marriages, military victories, and religious ceremonies that bound together a civilization spread across modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras. The Maya's astronomical and mathematical achievements reflected generations of careful observation. Their astronomers tracked Venus with accuracy not matched in Europe until the 16th century. They calculated the lunar month to within seconds of modern measurements. Their long-count calendar could track dates millions of years into the past and future. This astronomical knowledge wasn't merely academic, it was integrated into religious beliefs, agricultural planning, and political legitimacy. Kings timed coronations and military campaigns to align with celestial events, connecting earthly power to cosmic patterns. The architectural achievements of the classic Maya period demonstrated sophisticated engineering knowledge. Pyramids rose over 200 feet high, their steep staircases connecting earthly realms to celestial domains. Corbelled arch vaults allowed construction of multi-room palace complexes. Elaborate stucco decorations covered building facades, depicting gods, kings, and cosmological scenes. The cities represented not just population centers but sacred landscapes, where every building, plaza, and monument held religious and political significance. Yet by 900 AD, this magnificent civilization began experiencing catastrophic collapse in its heartland, an unraveling that would puzzle archaeologists for over a century. Around 900 AD, this magnificent civilization began to collapse, not gradually, not through conquest by foreign armies, but through a mysterious abandonment that left archaeologists puzzled for over a century. Within the span of just a few generations, the great Maya cities were empty. The ball courts fell silent, the elaborate royal ceremonies ended. Jungle vines began to reclaim the stone temples that had dominated the landscape for over 6 centuries. The inscribed monuments stopped. The last dated Maya monument in the southern lowlands was carved in 909 AD at Tonina. Archaeological evidence shows that this wasn't a gradual decline, but a relatively rapid collapse that happened within about 150 years. The pattern varied across different cities, some were abandoned quickly, others lingered with reduced populations, but the overall trajectory pointed towards systematic failure of the urban systems that had sustained Maya civilization. The collapse affected primarily the southern lowlands, while cities in the northern Yucatan continued to flourish for several more centuries, suggesting that whatever caused the crisis was specific to certain regions rather than affecting the entire Maya world uniformly. The mystery deepens when examining what the cities looked like after abandonment. Unlike sites destroyed by warfare or natural disasters, classic Maya cities show no evidence of violent destruction. Buildings weren't burned, walls weren't breached by invading armies, and there are no mass graves suggesting plague or massacre. Instead, the cities simply emptied out, with populations dispersing into smaller settlements or migrating to other regions. The monuments and temples remained standing, gradually being reclaimed by jungle growth as nature reasserted itself over the urban landscape. The cessation of monument construction provides clear chronological markers for the collapse. Maya kings had erected dated stone monuments, stelae, to commemorate important events, creating a detailed historical record. The frequency of these monuments declined sharply after 800 AD, with the last known stela in the southern lowlands dated to 909 AD. This sudden end to a tradition that had continued for centuries suggests a rapid breakdown in the political systems that had motivated and funded monument construction. Without kings powerful enough to mobilize labor for building projects, the tradition died out entirely. Population movements during and after the collapse created archaeological puzzles. Some regions saw dramatic population declines, while others showed evidence of population influx as people fled failing cities for areas with better resources. The demographic shifts suggest that the collapse wasn't uniform, but affected different regions at different times and with varying severity. Tracking these population movements through ceramic styles and settlement patterns has revealed complex migration patterns as Maya peoples sought more sustainable living situations. The continuation of Maya civilization in northern Yucatan cities like Chichen Itza complicates simple explanations of the collapse. These cities not only survived but flourished during the Terminal Classic period, developing new architectural styles and incorporating influences from central Mexico. The divergent fates of northern and southern Maya regions suggest that the collapse resulted from factors specific to the southern lowlands rather than civilization-wide failures. But what could cause such a dramatic societal breakdown in one of the ancient world's most sophisticated civilizations? Climate studies show that the Maya heartland experienced a series of severe droughts between 800 and 1000 AD. These weren't ordinary dry seasons, but prolonged periods of reduced rainfall that would have devastated the agricultural systems supporting dense urban populations. Lake sediment cores from across the region show evidence of dramatic decreases in water levels during this period. Environmental degradation played a crucial role. The Maya had transformed their landscape so thoroughly that they had created an ecological house of cards vulnerable to any climate stress. The drought evidence comes from multiple independent sources, creating a compelling picture of environmental crisis. Sediment cores from Lake Chichancanab in Yucatan show clear chemical signatures of reduced rainfall during the Terminal Classic period. Gypsum deposits in the lake sediments indicate periods when water levels dropped so low that dissolved minerals crystallized out of solution. Oxygen isotope ratios in the sediments confirm that these low water periods coincided with the Maya collapse, providing direct correlation between climate stress and societal breakdown. The severity of the droughts varied, with some periods experiencing rainfall reductions of 40–50% compared to normal levels. For agricultural systems already operating near their maximum capacity, such dramatic reductions would have been catastrophic. Crop failures would have led to food shortages, triggering social instability and undermining the authority of rulers who claim divine powers, including control over rain and agricultural fertility. The psychological impact of persistent drought in a society that viewed natural phenomena as expressions of divine will cannot be underestimated. Environmental degradation amplified the impact of natural climate variation. Without tree cover, soils eroded more rapidly during rains and retained less moisture during dry periods. Watershed degradation reduced the reliability of springs and streams. The landscape became increasingly vulnerable to drought, creating a situation where even moderate climate fluctuations could trigger agricultural crises that wouldn't have been catastrophic in less degraded environments. Archaeological evidence from sites like Copan shows clear signs of environmental stress. Soil studies reveal severe erosion during the Terminal Classic period. Pollen analysis shows dramatic decreases in tree coverage. Nutrient depletion in agricultural soils reduced crop yields even in years with adequate rainfall. The Maya had pushed their environment to its limits, and when drought struck, the degraded landscape couldn't buffer the impact. The civilization that had seemed so successful during favorable conditions proved highly vulnerable when environmental circumstances changed. The combination of natural drought and human-caused environmental degradation created a crisis that the Maya's sophisticated civilization couldn't overcome, leading to one of history's most dramatic societal collapses. When modern engineers first encountered Derinkuyu, they faced a puzzle that challenged everything they thought they knew about ancient construction. How do you scientifically analyze a structure that defies conventional engineering principles? An underground city that housed 20,000 people, extending 18 levels deep into solid volcanic rock, with a ventilation system so sophisticated it still functions perfectly after 1,500 years. The answer required deploying every tool in the modern archaeological toolkit, from ground-penetrating radar to computational fluid dynamics modeling. The scientific investigation began with ground-penetrating radar surveys in the 1,990 seconds. Teams of geophysicists moved their equipment across the surface above known entrances, sending electromagnetic pulses deep into the earth. The radar revealed a honeycomb of chambers, tunnels, and vertical shafts extending in all directions, some reaching depths over 85 meters below the surface. The underground complex was far larger than anyone had imagined, with the explored sections representing only a fraction of the total extent. Structural analysis, using finite element modeling software, revealed engineering sophistication that challenged assumptions about ancient capabilities. Engineers calculated the load-bearing capacity of the carved rock chambers, discovering that the ancient builders had instinctively understood principles of structural mechanics. The placement of load-bearing pillars, the arch shapes of doorways, the distribution of weight, everything followed optimal engineering principles that weren't formally described until centuries later. Geotechnical investigations revealed the genius of the location choice. The city was carved into tuff, a specific type of volcanic rock formed from compressed volcanic ash. This material had perfect properties for underground construction, soft enough to carve with simple tools when first exposed, but hardening when exposed to air. Core samples analyzed in laboratories showed that the tuff had compressive strength of 15 to 20 megapascals, more than adequate to support the massive underground structure without risk of collapse. The scale of organization required for construction rivaled the technical challenges. Derinkuyu wasn't built in a single campaign but expanded gradually over centuries, with successive generations adding new levels and chambers. Coordinating such long-term construction required institutional knowledge, preservation and planning that spanned multiple lifetimes. The consistency of design principles across different construction phases suggests master builders maintained standards and training systems that ensured quality control across generations. Modern dating techniques, combining radiocarbon analysis with thermoluminescence of dating of ceramics, established that major construction occurred during the Byzantine period, around the 7th century AD. However, evidence suggests earlier occupation, with some sections possibly dating to the Phrygian period around 8th century BCE, indicating the site's importance across multiple civilizations and millennia of continuous use and expansion. Using computational fluid dynamics modeling, researchers mapped the airflow patterns throughout Derinkuyu's complex. They discovered that the ancient engineers had created a sophisticated climate control system using natural convection principles. Fresh air entered through more than 52 ventilation shafts, with the deepest shaft extending 55 meters to the surface. The warmer air from the lower levels rose through these shafts, creating a natural circulation system that provided fresh air to every chamber. The ancient builders had somehow calculated the exact number and placement of shafts needed to ventilate a space for 20,000 people. The ventilation system's effectiveness was tested using tracer gases and air quality monitors throughout the complex. Researchers found that even at the deepest levels, oxygen levels remained adequate for human habitation, and carbon dioxide never reached dangerous concentrations. The ancient builders had achieved what would challenge modern HVAC engineers, creating natural ventilation for a large underground population without any mechanical assistance. The vertical shafts that form the system's core show remarkable engineering precision. They maintain consistent diameters throughout their length, ensuring optimal airflow without constrictions that could reduce ventilation efficiency. The shafts are positioned to take advantage of natural temperature differentials. Cooler air at lower levels gets warmed by human activity and rises naturally, while fresh air from the surface descends to replace it. This convection-driven circulation operates continuously without any external power source. The distribution of shaft openings throughout the city demonstrates systematic planning. Every inhabited chamber has access to ventilation, with larger spaces receiving proportionally more airflow through multiple shaft connections. Smaller storage areas and passages have reduced ventilation, showing that the builders understood different spaces had different air quality requirements. This differentiated approach to ventilation reflects sophisticated understanding of how underground environments affect human health and comfort. Secondary features enhanced the primary ventilation system. Horizontal passages connected different vertical shafts, creating redundancy and allowing air to circulate through multiple pathways. This network design meant that blocking a single shaft wouldn't compromise the entire system. Air could find alternative routes. The redundancy would have been crucial during sieges or emergencies, when some surface openings might be deliberately sealed for defensive purposes. The temperature regulation achieved by the ventilation system provides additional benefits. Underground spaces naturally maintain relatively stable temperatures year-round. The ventilation system prevents the buildup of excess heat from human activity, while avoiding excessive cooling that would make the spaces uncomfortable. The balance achieved suggests the builders understood thermal dynamics and designed the system to maintain optimal conditions without the temperature extremes that would occur in poorly ventilated underground spaces. This climate control capability would have made Derinkuyu habitable for extended periods. Teams descended into Derinkuyu's narrow passages, carrying portable LiDAR units, devices that fire millions of laser pulses per second to create precise digital maps. The scanning process was painstaking, with each chamber, tunnel, and carved niche documented with millimeter precision. The resulting 3D models revealed architectural details invisible to previous generations of archaeologists. The structural analysis that followed challenged fundamental assumptions about ancient engineering capabilities, showing that the ancient builders had instinctively understood principles of structural mechanics that weren't formally described until the 19th century. The LiDAR scanning revealed architectural features too subtle for human observers to detect. Slight variations in wall curvature that distributed stress loads optimally. Floor gradients designed to manage water drainage. Ceiling shapes that maximize structural stability while providing adequate headroom. These details demonstrated that Derinkuyu's builders possessed sophisticated understanding of how underground structures respond to geological forces. The 3D models allowed researchers to analyze the city's overall layout in ways impossible during physical exploration. The digital map revealed organizing principles, the main corridors following specific orientations, chambers arranged in logical hierarchies, defensive features positioned at strategic choke points. The city wasn't an organic accretion of randomly placed rooms, but a planned urban environment with clear functional zones and circulation patterns. Computer analysis identified multiple construction phases based on subtle differences in carving techniques and architectural styles. Earlier sections showed simpler designs and less refined stonework, while later editions displayed increased sophistication and decorative elements. This evolution suggested accumulated knowledge and improving techniques as builders gained experience. The phased construction also explained apparent inconsistencies. Different sections reflected different building periods rather than poor planning. The laser mapping documented sophisticated defensive features integrated throughout the city. Massive circular stone doors, each weighing up to 500 kilograms, could be rolled across passages to seal different sections. The doors could only be operated from inside, and their design made them nearly impossible to breach from outside. Strategic placement of these doors allowed inhabitants to seal off invaded sections while retreating to deeper levels, creating defense in depth that could frustrate attackers attempting to penetrate the city. The precision of the laser-generated models has enabled virtual reconstruction of the entire complex, allowing researchers worldwide to study Derinkuyu without physically visiting the site. These digital archives preserve detailed records of the city's current state, providing baseline data for monitoring any future deterioration and ensuring that knowledge of this remarkable structure is preserved regardless of what happens to the physical site. The discovery of sophisticated water management systems at multiple ancient sites reveals knowledge that rivals modern engineering. At Sacsayhuaman, archaeologists found evidence of hydraulic engineering that supplied the fortress and the city below. The Maya created raised fields and wetlands, terraced hillsides, and sophisticated irrigation systems that supported millions of people. At Derinkuyu, underground water sources were carefully integrated into the city's design, ensuring that inhabitants could survive extended periods of isolation without surface access. The water systems at these sites demonstrate understanding of hydraulic principles including gravity, flow, pressure management, and contamination prevention. Channels were carved with precise gradients that maintained flow without causing erosion. Settling basins allowed sediment to drop out before water entered distribution systems. Separate channels for clean water and drainage prevented contamination. These features reflect systematic approaches to water management developed through generations of accumulated experience. At Derinkuyu, wells extended to underground aquifers, providing reliable water sources that couldn't be cut off during sieges. The placement of wells at multiple levels ensured water availability throughout the city without requiring inhabitants to travel to surface sources. Stone channels distributed water from these wells to different areas, with the system designed to maintain flow even if parts of the city were sealed off for defensive purposes. This redundant design meant the water supply remained functional under various scenarios, including military emergencies. The Maya water management systems were particularly sophisticated, adapting to challenging tropical environments where seasonal variations created alternating floods and droughts. Reservoir systems captured rainwater during wet seasons, storing it for use during dry periods. Raised field agriculture in wetlands used carefully controlled water levels to maximize productivity while preventing waterlogging. The systems required ongoing maintenance and management, suggesting organized labor systems and administrative structures dedicated to water infrastructure. Sacsayhuaman's water channels showed advanced understanding of hydraulic engineering. The gradient of channels was calculated to maintain consistent flow over long distances without excessive velocity that would cause erosion. Junction points where channels merged were designed to prevent turbulence and sediment accumulation. The sophistication of these features indicates the Inca possessed theoretical understanding of fluid dynamics, even if they couldn't express it mathematically. The durability of these water systems, many still function after centuries, testifies to the quality of ancient engineering and the careful maintenance these systems received. The universal presence of advanced water management across diverse ancient civilizations suggests it was a fundamental requirement for urban development, with each culture developing solutions appropriate to their specific environmental challenges and available technologies. The precision of astronomical alignments at sites like Stonehenge, the Maya cities, and Egyptian pyramids reveals sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. The Maya developed the most accurate calendar system in human history, predicting eclipses thousands of years into the future. The Great Pyramid's internal passages align with specific stars and constellations. These achievements suggest that ancient peoples dedicated enormous resources to observing and recording celestial phenomena, developing mathematical and observational techniques that wouldn't be matched for centuries. The Maya calendar system consisted of multiple interlocking cycles, tracking different celestial and ritual periods. The Tzolk'in, 260-day sacred calendar, combined with the Hab, 365-day solar year, to create the calendar round of 52 years. The long count tracked days from a mythological creation date, allowing Maya scribes to record historical events with precision. Most remarkably, the Maya calculated the synodic period of Venus, 584 days, with an error of only 2 hours over 500 years, accuracy not achieved in Europe until the 16th century. The astronomical alignments at the Great Pyramid demonstrate sophisticated observational techniques. The northern shaft from the King's Chamber originally pointed toward Thuban, the pole star in ancient Egypt's era. The southern shaft aligned with Orion's belt, associated with Osiris in Egyptian cosmology. These alignments weren't approximate but precisely calculated, requiring years of careful observations to determine the exact angles needed. The precision achieved accurate to fractions of a degree indicates the use of sophisticated sighting instruments whose design remains unknown, since none have survived in the archaeological record. Stonehenge's solstice alignments required multi-generational observation programs. Determining the exact positions of solstice sunrises necessitated tracking the sun's movement over multiple years, marking its daily position and identifying the extreme points where it appears to pause before reversing direction. This systematic observation required dedication spanning decades, with knowledge passed from one generation of observers to the next. The integration of these alignments into massive stone monuments suggests astronomy held religious and political significance, justifying enormous resource investment. The motivation for astronomical observations combined practical and spiritual concerns. Agricultural societies needed accurate calendars for planting and harvest timing. But beyond practical applications, celestial observations connected human affairs to cosmic order. Kings and priests who could predict eclipses or track planetary movements demonstrated special knowledge that reinforced their authority. The heavens provided an unchanging reference point in an uncertain world, and those who understood celestial patterns possessed power that transcended ordinary human capabilities. Ancient astronomical achievements thus represent not just scientific accomplishment, but the intersection of practical knowledge, religious belief, and political power. Isotope analysis of bronze artifacts from Sanxingdui reveals sophisticated alloy compositions that demonstrate advanced metallurgical knowledge. The bronze casting techniques used to create massive masks and sacred trees required technological skills among the most advanced in the ancient world. At Pumapunku, chemical analysis shows builders had detailed knowledge of rock properties, carefully selecting specific types of basalt for particular structural purposes. These civilizations developed expertise in material science that suggests systematic experimentation and knowledge transmission across generations. The bronze alloys at Sanxingdui show careful control of tin content, typically ranging between 10–15% depending on the object's intended use. Masks and decorative items used higher tin content for better flow properties during casting, allowing reproduction of fine details. Structural elements used lower tin content for greater strength and durability. This differentiation indicates metallurgists understood how alloy composition affected material properties and adjusted formulas for specific applications. Knowledge that could only come from systematic experimentation over extended periods. The lost wax casting technique used for complex Sanxingdui pieces required multiple sophisticated steps. Craftsmen first modeled the desired form in beeswax, capturing every detail of the final piece. This wax model was then coated with multiple layers of clay, creating a mold that hardened when fired. The firing process melted away the wax, leaving a cavity that perfectly reproduced the original model. Molten bronze poured into this cavity took the form of the wax model. After cooling, the clay mold was broken away to reveal the bronze casting. This technique allowed creation of forms impossible to achieve through simpler methods, but required precise control of temperatures, timing, and materials. At Pumapunku, petrographic analysis revealed that builders selected different types of andesite for different purposes. Finer-grained varieties were chosen for surfaces requiring smooth finishes, while coarser stone was used for structural elements where strength mattered more than appearance. This selective use of materials demonstrates detailed knowledge of how mineral composition affects workability and structural properties. The builders didn't simply use whatever stone was available. They understood material properties well enough to match stone types to specific functional requirements. The transmission of metallurgical knowledge required institutional structures that preserved technical secrets across generations. Master craftsmen trained apprentices through years of hands-on practice, passing down formulas, techniques, and troubleshooting knowledge that couldn't be captured in written form. The consistency of quality across multiple artifacts indicates standardized training methods and quality control procedures. This knowledge transmission system functioned effectively for centuries, maintaining technical standards while gradually incorporating improvements discovered through experimentation. The sophistication of these knowledge systems rivals the technical achievements themselves, representing parallel developments in education and institutional organization that made advanced craftsmanship possible. The workforce question adds layers of complexity to every ancient mystery. Traditional estimates suggest that 20,000 to 30,000 workers labored on the Great Pyramid for over 20 years. Göbekli Tepe required organizing hundreds of workers from nomadic communities. The Inca coordinated thousands of workers at Sacsayhuaman for decades. These massive projects required administrative systems rivaling modern project management supply chains, quality control, worker housing, food production, and technical knowledge transmission across generations. The logistics of feeding thousands of workers for years created massive supply chain challenges. Archaeological evidence from workers' villages near the Great Pyramid reveals industrial-scale food production bakeries producing thousands of loaves daily, breweries making beer for the workforce, cattle processing facilities providing meat protein. The infrastructure required to support construction rivaled the pyramid itself in complexity, involving farmers growing surplus crops, transportation networks moving food to work sites, and storage facilities, preserving supplies. This support system required administrative coordination across Egypt's entire agricultural economy. Worker housing at construction sites shows careful planning for different social classes. Elite supervisors occupied well-built structures with better amenities, while common labourers lived in more basic dormitories. Medical facilities treated injuries. Skeletal remains show evidence of fractures that received medical care and healed properly. The presence of healthcare infrastructure indicates that project organisers understood the need to maintain workforce health and morale over long construction periods. Workers weren't expendable slaves but valued participants in sacred projects. Quality control systems ensured consistent standards across decades of construction. The precision of stonework at sites like Sacsayhuaman indicates that master craftsmen inspected work and rejected pieces that didn't meet specifications. This quality control required clear standards, training to ensure workers understood requirements, and hierarchies of supervision to maintain consistency. Modern project management recognizes these same needs, but ancient administrators developed effective systems without computer tracking or standardized documentation. The coordination of specialized labor created complex organizational structures. Quarry workers, transporters, stone shapers, builders, tool makers, and support staff all needed to work in synchronized fashion. Delays in any area could halt the entire project. Managing these interdependencies required sophisticated scheduling, resource allocation, and contingency planning. The success of ancient megaprojects demonstrates that administrators developed effective management techniques despite lacking modern communication and documentation tools. The social motivation that brought workers to these projects involved more than coercion. Religious devotion, civic obligation, and the promise of eternal reward motivated participation in sacred construction. Workers at the pyramids weren't slaves but corvée labourers fulfilling obligations to Pharaoh and gods. This system relied on shared beliefs about cosmic order and human roles within it, suggesting that ideology and social structure were as important as physical tools in enabling ancient achievements. Without written language in many cases, how did ancient builders transmit complex technical knowledge across generations? The precision stonework at Pumapunku and Sacsayhuaman suggests knowledge passed down through families of skilled craftsmen. The construction of Göbekli Tepe over centuries indicates stable transmission of architectural principles. The Maya maintained astronomical and mathematical knowledge for over 600 years. These civilizations developed sophisticated methods for preserving and teaching technical skills that left minimal archaeological traces. The apprenticeship system formed the foundation of technical knowledge transmission. Young craftsmen spent years working alongside masters, learning through observation, practice, and correction. This hands-on training conveyed tacit knowledge that couldn't be fully captured in written instructions. The feel of stone being worked correctly, the sound of proper bronze casting temperature, the subtle signs that indicated when to adjust techniques. Master craftsmen possessed this embodied knowledge and could recognize when apprentices had truly internalized skills versus merely mimicking surface behaviors. The consistency of architectural styles across centuries at sites like Göbekli Tepe indicates successful knowledge preservation. Building techniques, symbolic conventions, and construction standards remained remarkably stable over multiple generations, suggesting formal training systems rather than casual skill transfer. This stability required institutional structures, guilds, priesthoods, or family lineages that maintained standards and controlled access to specialized knowledge. The institutions themselves left little archaeological trace. Oral traditions played crucial roles in preserving knowledge in non-literate societies. Complex information could be encoded in stories, songs, and rituals that were easier to remember than abstract technical descriptions. The Polynesian navigation system that allowed voyaging across vast Pacific distances was transmitted orally for centuries, with navigators memorizing star positions, wave patterns, and bird behaviors through narrative frameworks. Similar systems likely preserved construction knowledge, with technical information embedded in mythological or ceremonial contexts that aided memorization and ensured accurate transmission. The Maya provide an example of how written records complemented practical training. Hieroglyphic texts recorded astronomical observations and calendar calculations, creating permanent references that supplemented oral instruction. The combination of written records and practical training proved more durable than either alone texts, preserved precise numerical data, while apprenticeship conveyed interpretive skills needed to use the information effectively. This hybrid system allowed Maya astronomical knowledge to accumulate over centuries, with each generation building on precisely recorded observations from predecessors. The loss of knowledge, when transmission systems broke down, demonstrates their fragility. The Sanxingdui bronze working tradition apparently vanished without successors, suggesting that whatever institutional structures preserved those skills were disrupted or destroyed. Similarly, the construction techniques used at megalithic sites were often lost when the societies that practiced them collapsed or transformed. Ancient peoples developed remarkable abilities to adapt to challenging environments. The Maya transformed vast jungle areas into productive farmland, using techniques modern science is only beginning to appreciate. The Inca built on steep mountain slopes using sophisticated terracing and water management. Derinku's builders created livable spaces deep underground in volcanic rock. Nan Madol rose from coral reefs in the Pacific. These achievements demonstrate sophisticated understanding of environmental constraints and creative problem-solving that pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible. Maya agricultural techniques worked with tropical ecosystems rather than against them. Raised field systems in wetlands created microenvironments where crops benefited from moisture retention and natural fertilization from aquatic plants. The technique prevented waterlogging while maintaining consistent moisture during dry periods. Forest gardens mimicked natural jungle structure with multiple crop layers, tall fruit trees, mid-level crops, ground-level vegetables, maximizing productivity per acre, while maintaining ecological diversity that prevented pest outbreaks and soil depletion. Inca terracing transformed steep Andean slopes into productive agricultural land, while preventing erosion that would have destroyed soil fertility. Each terrace was carefully engineered with drainage systems that prevented water accumulation, while retaining enough moisture for crops. The stone retaining walls were built to last centuries, using the same interlocking techniques visible at Sacsayhuaman. Different microclimates at various elevations allowed cultivation of diverse crops, potatoes at high altitudes, corn at middle elevations, coca and fruit at lower levels. This vertical archipelago strategy maximized the productivity of mountain environments that seemed unsuitable for intensive agriculture. The Derinkuyu builders exploited the unique properties of tuff, creating spaces that maintained comfortable temperatures and humidity levels year-round. Underground environments naturally buffer temperature extremes, remaining cool in summer and relatively warm in winter. The ventilation system prevented the buildup of excess humidity while maintaining air quality adequate for long-term habitation. This environmental control was achieved through passive design rather than active systems, demonstrating deep understanding of how underground spaces interact with surface climate. Nan Madol's builders adapted to marine environments by working with, rather than against tidal patterns. The canals that connected artificial islands functioned as transportation networks during high tide, while draining during low tide, preventing stagnant water that would breed disease. The basalt construction resisted saltwater corrosion, far better than alternatives like wood or coral blocks. The elevated platforms protected residential areas from storm surges while allowing water to flow beneath during extreme events. This flood-resilient design anticipated modern approaches to building in vulnerable coastal zones. These environmental adaptations weren't achieved through trial and error alone, but represented accumulated knowledge from generations of careful observation, demonstrating that ancient peoples possessed sophisticated ecological understanding, despite lacking modern scientific frameworks for expressing that knowledge. Despite decades of research using increasingly sophisticated scientific methods, fundamental mysteries remain. How did Göbekli Tepe's builders achieve such precision with stone tools? What specific techniques lifted the massive stones at Baalbek and the Great Pyramid? Why was Nan Madol built on artificial islands rather than on land? What caused the Maya collapse to affect some regions but not others? Why did the Sanxingdui people deliberately destroy and bury their sacred objects? These questions continue to drive archaeological investigation, with each answer revealing deeper layers of complexity in our ancestors' achievements. The precision at Göbekli Tepe challenges our understanding of Neolithic capabilities. Stone tools shouldn't produce the accuracy documented in the pillars, yet the archaeological evidence is undeniable. Either the builders possess techniques we haven't yet identified, or human patience and skill can achieve more than modern assumptions suggest. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that stone tools can work limestone effectively. But replicating Göbekli Tepe's precision requires time investments that seem incompatible with hunter-gatherer lifestyles. The contradiction between apparent capabilities and available technology remains unresolved. The stone-lifting techniques at megalithic sites have generated countless theories but no definitive answers. The straight ramp theory, spiral ramp theory, and internal ramp theory each explain some evidence, while failing to account for other aspects. The massive stones at Baalbek push even Roman capabilities to their limits, with the largest abandoned blocks suggesting those limits were reached. Modern heavy construction equipment would be challenged by similar tasks. Yet ancient builders succeeded using methods that left minimal archaeological traces. The gap between achievement and explanation persists. Nan Madol's location on artificial islands defies practical explanation. Building on land would have been vastly easier, avoiding the complications of marine construction. Yet the builders chose the harder path, investing enormous effort in creating artificial foundations in a coral reef. The decision suggests powerful symbolic or practical motivations that archaeological evidence hasn't yet revealed. Whether religious beliefs, defensive considerations, or other factors drove the choice remains unknown. The regional variation in Maya collapse patterns indicates complexity beyond simple environmental determinism. Some cities failed while neighbours survived. Northern cities flourished as southern ones emptied. This patchwork pattern suggests multiple interacting factors rather than a single cause, but untangling the specific combinations that led to different outcomes in different regions remains challenging. Each site presents unique circumstances that complicate general explanations. The deliberate destruction and burial of Sangxingdui artifacts represents one of archaeology's most puzzling ritual practices. Why break and burn valuable objects before burying them? The act suggests crisis, transformation, or ritual necessity that we can't fully comprehend from material evidence alone. Without written records explaining the motivations, we're left interpreting actions whose meaning remains opaque across millennia. These enduring mysteries remind us that for all our scientific sophistication, the minds and motivations of ancient peoples sometimes remain beyond our full understanding, leaving gaps that may never be completely filled.